Tonight, as you get ready to sleep, we'll listen to Buddha's stories and teachings in a simple, calm way. You'll unwind, ease anxiety, and fall asleep more easily, while picking up practical ideas about compassion and being present. Tonight, we begin a sacred journey together through the timeless wisdom of the Buddha, a journey that will carry you gently into the most peaceful sleep you have ever known. For over 2,000 years, seekers of truth have turned to these ancient teachings not just for enlightenment, but for the simple, profound gift of inner peace. Tonight, these teachings become your pathway into deep rest, your guide through the gentle transition from waking to sleeping, your companion in the sacred darkness that heals and renews. As you settle into this moment, feel the weight of your body being fully supported by whatever surface holds you. Notice how your breath is already beginning to slow, how your muscles are starting to soften, how your mind is preparing to receive these ancient gifts of wisdom. The Buddha taught that peace is not something we must create or achieve, but something we must simply allow, something that arises naturally when we stop fighting against the flow of life. Tonight, you are learning this art of allowing, this practice of non-resistance, this pathway to the deepest possible rest. Let yourself sink a little deeper now, knowing that you are completely safe, completely held, completely free to let go of everything that has been burdening you. The Buddha was born as Prince Siddhartha in a kingdom of great wealth and beauty. His father, wanting to protect him from all suffering, created a paradise within the palace walls where only youth, health, and beauty were permitted to enter. For 29 years, Siddhartha lived in this protected world, never seeing illness, old age, or death. He was surrounded by every pleasure, married to a beautiful princess, blessed with a son, given everything that the world considers valuable. Yet despite all this abundance, something within him remained restless, unsatisfied, searching for a deeper truth. One day he ventured beyond the palace walls for the first time and encountered what Buddhists call the four sights. First, he saw an old man, bent and trembling with age, and realized that youth does not last forever. Then he saw a sick man, writhing in pain, and understood that health is temporary. Next, he saw a corpse being carried to cremation, and confronted the reality that all life ends in death. These sights shook him to his core, shattering the illusion of permanence he had lived within. But then he saw a fourth sight, a wandering monk with a peaceful face, someone who had renounced worldly possessions yet radiated a contentment that Siddhartha had never seen in the palace. In that moment he realized that true peace could not be found in avoiding suffering, but in understanding it deeply, in meeting it face to face with wisdom and compassion. This story holds profound wisdom for your journey into sleep tonight. Like Siddhartha in his palace, we often spend our days trying to avoid discomfort, pushing away difficult emotions, denying the realities that make us anxious or afraid. We build walls around ourselves, hoping to keep out anything that disturbs our peace. Yet this very resistance, this constant fighting against what we don't want to feel or face, is what prevents the deep peace we truly seek. The Buddha discovered that peace comes not from avoiding life's difficulties, but from developing a wise relationship with them, from learning to meet all experiences with an open heart and a calm mind. As you prepare for sleep tonight, notice if you've been carrying this tendency to resist, this habit of pushing away discomfort or worry. Notice it with gentleness, without judgment, simply becoming aware of how much energy you've been spending in this internal struggle. Tonight, you can begin to put down this burden, to stop fighting, to allow everything to be exactly as it is. After seeing the four sights, Siddhartha made a decision that would change not only his life, but the lives of millions who would follow his teachings. In the middle of the night, he left the palace, leaving behind his sleeping wife and infant son, his kingdom, his wealth, everything that defined his identity as a prince. He cut off his long hair, exchanged his royal robes for simple cloth, and set out to discover the truth about suffering and the path to liberation. For 6 years, he practiced extreme asceticism, pushing his body to the edge of death through fasting and severe austerities. He believed that by punishing the body, he could free the spirit. He became so thin that when he touched his stomach, he could feel his backbone. His ribs stood out like the beams of an old building, his eyes sank deep into their sockets. Yet despite all this effort, all this sacrifice, enlightenment remained as distant as ever. He realized that extreme self-denial was just another form of the extreme self-indulgence he had known in the palace. Both were wrong paths, both were forms of imbalance, both led away from truth rather than toward it. This realization led the Buddha to discover what he called the middle way, the path between extremes, the balance between indulgence and denial, between effort and surrender. He accepted a bowl of milk rice from a young girl named Sujata, much to the shock of his fellow ascetics who abandoned him, thinking he had given up the spiritual quest. But the Buddha understood something profound. The body and spirit are not enemies, but partners in the journey toward awakening. Denying the body's needs doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to exhaustion and imbalance. True peace comes from honoring the body while not being enslaved by it, from enjoying life's pleasures while not being attached to them, from meeting life with wisdom that sees clearly without being caught in extremes. As you rest here tonight, feel how this teaching applies to your own relationship with sleep and rest. Perhaps you've been pushing yourself too hard, denying your body's need for rest, treating sleep as an inconvenience or a waste of time. Or perhaps you've gone to the other extreme, sleeping excessively as a way to escape from life's challenges. The Buddha's middle way invites you to honor sleep as a sacred necessity, to give your body the rest it genuinely needs, while also engaging fully with life when you're awake. This balanced approach creates the conditions for the deepest, most restorative sleep. After accepting the milk rice and regaining his strength, Siddhartha sat down beneath a Bodhi tree and made a vow. He would not rise from that spot until he had discovered the truth he had been seeking for so long. He sat in meditation as the sun set and darkness fell. Throughout that long night, he was visited by Mara, the tempter, the force of illusion and distraction. Mara came first with his army of demons, trying to frighten the Buddha into abandoning his quest. Arrows were shot at him, but as they approached, they transformed into flower petals that fell harmlessly around him. Then Mara sent his beautiful daughters to seduce the Buddha, to lure him away from his meditation with promises of pleasure and comfort, but the Buddha remained unmoved, anchored in his deep intention to see clearly, to understand fully, to awaken completely. Mara then tried a different approach, whispering doubts into the Buddha's mind. Who do you think you are to claim enlightenment? What makes you worthy of this awakening? Who will witness your achievement? In response to this challenge, the Buddha reached down and touched the earth with his right hand, calling the earth itself to witness his worthiness. The earth responded with a tremendous roar, affirming that yes, this being had prepared himself through countless lifetimes of compassion and wisdom and was ready for this moment of awakening. This image of the Buddha touching the earth holds special meaning for your journey into sleep tonight. When doubt arises, when the mind begins to race with questions and worries, when you feel unworthy of peace or rest, you too can touch the earth. You can feel the solid support beneath your body, the ground that holds you without judgment, without conditions, without asking you to prove your worthiness. The earth supports all beings equally, the wise and the foolish, the enlightened and the confused, the peaceful and the troubled. You don't have to earn the right to rest. You don't have to achieve perfection before you deserve deep sleep. Like the Buddha calling upon the earth to witness his journey, you can call upon the simple truth that you exist, that you have lived this day as best you could, and that is enough. Place your hand on your heart or on your belly now, feeling the solid reality of your own body, your own breath, your own being. This is your earth, your foundation, your proof that you belong here, that you deserve rest, that you are worthy of peace. As the night deepened, the Buddha's meditation grew deeper still. He began to see with extraordinary clarity into the nature of existence itself. In the first watch of the night, he gained the ability to remember all his past lives, seeing the countless incarnations he had lived, the lessons learned, the wisdom accumulated over eons of time. In the second watch of the night, he developed the divine eye that could see the death and rebirth of all beings, understanding the law of karma, how actions create consequences that shape future experiences. But it was in the third watch of the night, as dawn approached, that the final and most profound realization came. He saw clearly the Four Noble Truths that would become the foundation of all his teaching. He understood that suffering exists, that it has a cause, that it can end, and that there is a path leading to its end. As the morning star appeared in the eastern sky, Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, the awakened one, the one who sees clearly, the one who has crossed from the shore of suffering to the shore of peace. The Buddha's first noble truth is that suffering exists, or more accurately, that unsatisfactoriness exists. This doesn't mean that life is only suffering or that we should be pessimistic. It means that even in the midst of pleasure, there is a subtle sense that things cannot remain as they are, that all pleasant experiences will eventually end, that nothing in this world of constant change can provide permanent satisfaction. The second noble truth is that suffering has a cause, and that cause is craving or clinging. We suffer not because of what happens to us, but because of how we relate to what happens. When we cling to pleasant experiences, desperate for them to continue, we suffer when they inevitably change. When we push away unpleasant experiences, fighting against their presence, we create additional suffering through our resistance. The third noble truth is perhaps the most hopeful message ever spoken. It declares that suffering can end, that liberation is possible, that peace is not just a temporary state, but a permanent possibility. The fourth noble truth describes the path to this liberation, what the Buddha called the Noble Eightfold Path, a way of living that leads naturally to the end of suffering and the realization of lasting peace. As you listen to these teachings tonight, you might notice your mind trying to grasp them, trying to understand them intellectually, trying to figure out how to apply them. But the Buddha himself emphasized that his teachings were not meant merely for intellectual understanding. He compared his teachings to a raft that helps you cross a river. Once you've reached the other shore, you don't need to carry the raft with you forever. The teachings are skillful means, tools to help you discover truth directly through your own experience. Tonight, you don't need to understand everything perfectly. You don't need to memorize the Four Noble Truths or analyze their meaning. You simply need to let these words wash over you like gentle waves. Let them work on you at a deeper level than thought. Let them guide you into a state of profound relaxation and peace. The Buddha's teachings have been helping people find peace for over 2,000 years. They have been tested by millions of practitioners across countless cultures and eras. They have proven their power to transform suffering into peace, confusion into clarity, restlessness into deep rest. Tonight, this ancient wisdom is working on you, preparing your body and mind for the most healing sleep. After his enlightenment, the Buddha spent several weeks sitting beneath and near the Bodhi tree, integrating his profound realization. At first, he wondered whether he should try to teach what he had discovered. It was so subtle, so contrary to ordinary understanding, so easily misunderstood. Surely people would not understand, would not accept, would not be able to follow this path. But then, compassion arose in his heart. He thought of all the beings who were suffering, who were searching for peace just as he had searched, who were trapped in confusion and fear. For their sake, he decided to teach, to share what he had discovered, to offer the gift of Dharma, the gift of truth. He walked to a deer park near Benares, where his 5 former companions were staying, the ascetics who had abandoned him when he accepted food. When they saw him approaching, they agreed among themselves that they would not honor him, for he had given up the spiritual quest by accepting comforts. But as he drew closer, something in his presence, some quality of deep peace and radiant clarity, caused them to rise spontaneously and offer him a seat. They could see that something fundamental had changed, that this was no longer the struggling seeker they had known, but someone who had found what they all sought. To these 5 ascetics, the Buddha gave his first teaching, setting in motion the wheel of Dharma that continues to turn today. He taught them about the middle way, about the 4 noble truths, about the path that leads from suffering to liberation. One by one, they understood, they awakened, they realized the truth that the Buddha was pointing to. They became the first Sangha, the first community of practitioners, the first to prove that the Buddha's awakening was not unique to him but accessible to all who sincerely practice the path. This is one of the most beautiful aspects of the Buddha's teaching. He never claimed to be a god or a supernatural being. He never said that his enlightenment was special or available only to a chosen few. He simply said, "I have found the way out of suffering, and you can too." This path is open to all, regardless of their background, their education, their past mistakes, their current circumstances. The peace I have found is the peace that waits within you, the Buddha taught. You don't need to become someone else to find it. You need to see clearly who and what you already are. As you rest here tonight, feel the profound gift of these teachings that have been passed down through 2,000 years, preserved and practiced by countless monks and nuns and lay people who found in them the key to genuine peace. You are part of this ancient lineage now, connected through these teachings to all who have sought peace, all who have found it, all who continue to walk this path. The Buddha spoke of a lamp that lights other lamps. His enlightenment was the first lamp, and from it, millions of other lamps have been lit across the centuries and around the world. Tonight, his teaching is lighting your lamp, awakening the peace that has always existed within you, helping you remember what you have temporarily forgotten. You don't have to do this alone. You are supported by an invisible community of seekers, held by the accumulated wisdom of generations, guided by teachings that have proven their power to transform lives. One of the Buddha's most beautiful teachings is about the nature of mind. He taught that the mind in its natural state is luminous, clear, pure, peaceful. It is only temporarily obscured by clouds of confusion, desire, aversion, and ignorance. These clouds are not permanent stains, but passing weather. When the clouds clear, the mind's natural luminosity shines forth. This means that peace is not something foreign that you must acquire from outside yourself. Peace is your natural state, temporarily covered over by the habits and patterns of thinking that create stress and suffering. When you rest deeply, when you let go of trying to control everything, when you stop fighting against what is, the clouds naturally begin to clear. Your innate peace begins to shine through. This is what sleep offers you each night, an opportunity to return to your natural state, to clear away the accumulated clouds of the day, to remember the luminous awareness that you truly are. The Buddha also taught extensively about mindfulness, about the practice of paying attention to present moment experience with clarity and without judgment. This teaching is especially relevant as you prepare for sleep. So often, our minds are anywhere but here. We're replaying the past, rehashing conversations, regretting mistakes, or we're rehearsing the future, planning tomorrow, worrying about what might happen. This constant mental time travel is exhausting. It keeps the mind activated and prevents the natural descent into sleep. The practice of mindfulness invites you to come back to this moment, to feel your body where it is right now, to notice your breath moving in and out in this present instant, to hear the sounds that exist in this actual moment, rather than sounds you're remembering or imagining. This simple return to the present is profoundly relaxing because in this moment right now you are actually okay. Whatever challenges you face today are over. Whatever worries you have about tomorrow haven't happened yet. In this present moment, you are breathing, you are lying down, you are safe, you are held. Let's practice this together now. Notice the sensation of your body touching whatever supports it. Feel the weight of your head on the pillow or surface beneath it. Observe the temperature of the air on your skin. Listen to the sound of these words and any background sounds that might be present. Notice your breath, not trying to change it, simply observing how it moves in and out naturally. See if you can feel your heartbeat anywhere in your body. This is mindfulness. This simple noticing of what is actually happening rather than being lost in thoughts about what happened or what might happen. As you practice this gentle awareness, your nervous system begins to calm, your brain waves begin to slow, your body receives the message that it's safe to let go, safe to rest, safe to sleep. The Buddha taught that this kind of mindfulness is one of the most powerful practices for cultivating peace. When you're truly present, truly here, truly aware of this moment without judgment, suffering cannot gain a foothold. Worry requires thinking about the future. Regret requires dwelling on the past, but peace only requires being fully alive to this present moment. The Buddha spent 45 years after his enlightenment traveling on foot throughout India, teaching anyone who wished to learn, regardless of their caste, gender, education, or social status. This was revolutionary in his time, when spiritual teachings were often kept secret or reserved for the elite. The Buddha taught farmers and kings, prostitutes and priests, children and elders. To each, he offered the same essential message: you have within you everything necessary to find lasting peace. His teachings were always adapted to the understanding and needs of his listeners. To someone overwhelmed by desire, he taught about impermanence and the suffering that comes from clinging. To someone rigid and judgmental, he taught about compassion and the interconnectedness of all beings. To someone lost in intellectual speculation, he taught about direct experience and practical application. This flexibility, this ability to meet each person where they were, is part of what made the Buddha such an extraordinary teacher. He wasn't trying to impose a rigid doctrine, but offering tools that each person could use in their own unique journey toward awakening. One of the most famous stories about the Buddha's teaching method involves a woman named Kisa Gotami who came to him in profound grief. Her infant son had died, and she was carrying his body through the village, begging anyone she met to give her medicine to revive him. People thought she had gone mad with grief. Someone directed her to the Buddha, saying that if anyone had such medicine, he would. She came to the Buddha and begged him to bring her son back to life. The Buddha looked at her with deep compassion and said he would help her, but first she must bring him a handful of mustard seeds from a house where no one had ever died. Kisa Gotami was filled with hope and went from house to house in the village, asking for mustard seeds. At each house, people were happy to give her seeds, but when she asked if anyone had died in that household, the answer was always yes. In one house, a father had died, in another, a wife, in another, a child. As she moved through the village, a realization slowly dawned. Death is universal. Every family, every person, every life is touched by this reality. Her grief was not unique, not a punishment, not unfair. It was part of the human experience that connects all beings. She returned to the Buddha without the mustard seeds, but with a completely different understanding. She was ready to hear his teachings about impermanence, about the nature of attachment, about the path that leads through grief to peace. The Buddha didn't give her a philosophical lecture when she first arrived. He gave her an experience that allowed her to discover the truth herself. This story teaches us something important about how wisdom works. We cannot simply hear teachings intellectually and expect them to transform us. We must live into them, experience them, discover their truth in our own lives. Tonight, as you listen to these Buddha stories and teachings, you are not being asked to believe anything on faith or to accept ideas just because they come from an ancient tradition. You are being invited to notice your own experience, to see if these teachings resonate with something you already know deep inside, to test their truth in the laboratory of your own consciousness. As you relax more and more deeply, as your body settles and your mind quiets, you are conducting an experiment. You are discovering whether letting go actually does bring peace, whether mindfulness actually does calm the nervous system, whether the Buddha's teachings about the nature of suffering and the path to liberation are true in your own direct experience. Another powerful teaching from the Buddha concerns what he called the hindrances, the 5 mental states that prevent deep meditation and peace. These are desire for sense pleasures, ill will or aversion, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry and doubt. Every meditator encounters these obstacles, and learning to work with them skillfully is essential for developing concentration and peace. What's interesting is that the Buddha didn't teach us to fight against these hindrances or to feel guilty when they arise. Instead, he taught us to recognize them clearly, to see them as passing weather in the mind, and to gently return to our object of meditation. This same wisdom applies to falling asleep. Often when we're trying to sleep, these hindrances appear. Desire might arise as we replay pleasant experiences or fantasize about things we want. Aversion might appear as we rehearse arguments or dwell on things that angered us. Sloth and torpor, which sound like they would help us sleep, actually create a dull, foggy state different from true restful sleep. Restlessness and worry are perhaps the most common hindrances to sleep, keeping the mind activated with endless concerns. And doubt can appear as we wonder whether we'll be able to sleep, whether these teachings will work, whether peace is truly possible for us. The Buddha taught that when these hindrances arise, the skillful response is not to fight them, but to recognize them clearly and gently redirect attention. If you notice desire arising, you can acknowledge it. There is desire. You don't have to judge it or get caught up in it. Simply naming it creates a little space. Then you can gently return your attention to your breath, to the sensation of your body, to these teachings you're hearing. If aversion appears, again you can note it. There is aversion. Then return to the present moment. If restlessness shows up, recognize it. There is restlessness. And return to your anchor in the present. This gentle redirecting, done with patience and without self-criticism, gradually weakens the power of the hindrances. They begin to arise less frequently and with less force. Peace becomes more accessible. Sleep becomes easier to enter. Over time, with practice, you develop a new relationship with your mind. You're no longer at the mercy of whatever thoughts and emotions happen to appear. You're the aware space in which they appear, able to observe them without being controlled by them. The Buddha often taught using the metaphor of a garden. The mind is like a garden, he would say, and the thoughts and emotions that arise are like seeds that have been planted there. Some seeds produce beautiful flowers and nourishing fruits. These are thoughts of kindness, generosity, wisdom, peace. Other seeds produce weeds and thorns. These are thoughts of hatred, greed, delusion, fear. We don't have complete control over what seeds get planted in the garden of the mind. Seeds blow in from our culture, our past experiences, our interactions with others, but we do have control over which seeds we water and which we allow to wither from lack of attention. When a thought of anger arises and we dwell on it, replaying the situation that angered us, imagining what we should have said, feeling righteous indignation, we are watering the seed of anger. It will grow stronger and produce more seeds of its kind. But when a thought of anger arises and we simply notice it without feeding it, without elaborating on it, it will eventually wither. At the same time, when thoughts of peace, kindness, or gratitude arise, we can choose to dwell on them, to let them fill our consciousness, to savor them. This waters the seeds of peace and makes them more likely to arise again. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you have the opportunity to be very intentional about which seeds you water. You can choose to let go of thoughts that create tension and suffering. You can choose to dwell on thoughts and images that create peace and ease. You can decide what the last thoughts before sleep will be, knowing that these thoughts will continue to work in your consciousness throughout the night. This is why many Buddhist practitioners end their day with what's called a loving kindness meditation, offering wishes of peace and happiness to themselves and all beings. This ensures that the last seeds watered before sleep are seeds of love, connection, and goodwill. Even if you don't do a formal meditation, you can simply call to mind one thing you're grateful for, one person you love, one moment of beauty from the day. Let that be the last thing in your awareness as you drift into sleep, ensuring that the seeds of joy and appreciation are the ones being watered as your conscious mind releases into rest. The Buddha's teachings on compassion are perhaps his most beautiful gift to the world. He taught that genuine compassion arises when we truly understand the suffering of others, when we recognize that all beings wish to be happy and free from pain, just as we do. This compassion is not pity, which carries a sense of superiority, looking down on someone we consider beneath us. True compassion recognizes our fundamental equality, our shared vulnerability, our common longing for peace and happiness. The Buddha taught that developing compassion is not just morally good, but profoundly healing for the person who cultivates it. When we hold others in compassion, our own hearts open and soften. When we wish for the happiness of others, we create the conditions for our own happiness. When we work to alleviate the suffering of others, we transform our own suffering in the process. This is not a transaction or a selfish motivation. It's simply the nature of the interconnected reality we live in. What we do to others, we do to ourselves. What we wish for others, we create in our own consciousness. There is a beautiful story about the Buddha walking through a forest with his attendant, Ananda. They came upon a monk who was very ill, lying in his own waste, too weak to care for himself. The other monks in the monastery had abandoned him because his illness had a foul smell and was difficult to witness. The Buddha immediately began to care for the sick monk, cleaning him, giving him water, making him comfortable. Ananda joined in helping, and together they restored some dignity and comfort to the suffering monk. Later, the Buddha gathered all the monks and spoke to them sternly. He said, "Monks, you have no mother or father here to care for you. If you do not care for each other, who will care for you? Whoever would care for me should care for the sick." This teaching illustrates that compassion is not an optional add onto spiritual practice, but its very heart. We cannot awaken to peace while turning away from the suffering of others. We cannot find genuine happiness while remaining indifferent to the pain around us. The path to peace necessarily includes the development of a compassionate heart that naturally responds to suffering with the wish to help. As you rest here tonight, you might bring to mind someone in your life who is suffering right now. Perhaps someone who is ill, someone who is grieving, someone who is struggling with fear or loneliness or pain. Instead of turning away from their suffering or feeling helpless about it, you can make a simple offering. You can wish for their peace, their comfort, their healing. You don't have to believe that your wish will magically cure them. You're simply choosing to hold them in your heart with kindness, to connect with their humanity, to offer the gift of your care. This practice of thinking of others as you prepare for sleep actually helps you sleep more peacefully. When we turn all our attention inward, focusing only on our own problems and concerns, we can become trapped in a narrow, self-focused perspective that magnifies our suffering. But when we widen our lens to include others, when we recognize that we're all in this together, all struggling with various forms of suffering, all longing for peace, something in us relaxes. Our problems don't seem quite so overwhelming when we remember they're part of the universal human experience. Our loneliness eases when we feel connected to all beings through this shared vulnerability. The Buddha taught what are called the 4 Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes. These are 4 qualities of heart that, when cultivated, create the conditions for profound peace and happiness. The first is metta, or loving kindness, a warm friendliness toward all beings, wishing for their happiness and well-being. The second is karuna, compassion, the caring response to suffering, the wish that beings be free from pain. The third is mudita, sympathetic joy, the ability to genuinely delight in the happiness and success of others without jealousy or comparison. The fourth is upekkha, equanimity, a spacious balance that remains steady in the face of life's ups and downs, that treats all beings with equal regard. These 4 qualities support and balance each other. Loving kindness without compassion might be superficial, unable to meet real suffering. Compassion without equanimity might become overwhelming, leading to burnout and despair. But when all 4 are developed together, they create an unshakable foundation for peace. Tonight, let's practice dwelling in these divine abodes for a few moments. Feel into the quality of loving kindness first. Imagine someone you love easily, perhaps a child or a dear friend or a beloved pet. Notice the natural warmth that arises in your heart when you think of them. That warmth is loving kindness. Now let that feeling expand like ripples spreading across a pond. Let it include more people, eventually including yourself, including people you find difficult, including all beings everywhere. You don't have to force this feeling or pretend to love everyone equally. Simply set the intention, opening the door of your heart just a little wider than usual. Now feel into compassion. Bring to mind someone you know who is suffering. Feel how your heart naturally responds to their pain, how you wish they could be free from it. That tender caring is compassion. Let it expand to include all who suffer, which ultimately means all beings, since all experience difficulty and pain at various times. Then touch into sympathetic joy. Think of something good that happened to someone else recently. Perhaps someone got good news, achieved something they worked hard for, experienced a moment of genuine happiness. Instead of comparing their situation to yours or feeling envious, simply let yourself feel glad for them. That unselfish happiness is mudita. Finally, rest in equanimity. Feel yourself held by something larger than your personal ups and downs. Recognize that all beings are subject to the laws of cause and effect, that each person is navigating their own karma, their own lessons, their own path. You can care deeply while also maintaining a wise perspective that doesn't get overwhelmed. This balanced caring is upekkha. As these 4 qualities settle into your heart, notice how peaceful they make you feel. There's nothing agitated or aggressive about them. They're soft and open, yet strong and stable. This is the emotional foundation for the deepest rest. When your heart is at peace, when you're not carrying resentment or jealousy or harsh judgment toward yourself or others, your whole being can relax. Sleep comes naturally to a peaceful heart. The Buddha knew this, which is why he emphasized the cultivation of these beautiful qualities as essential to the path of awakening. They're not just nice ideas or moral imperatives, they're practical tools for creating the inner conditions that make peace possible. One of the most profound teachings the Buddha offered concerns the nature of self. He taught what is called anatta, or not self, the idea that what we think of as a permanent, unchanging self or soul is actually a process, a flowing river of changing experiences rather than a fixed entity. This can sound disturbing at first. If there's no permanent self, then who am I? But the Buddha wasn't saying that you don't exist. He was saying that you don't exist in the way you think you do. What you call yourself is actually a collection of constantly changing processes, physical sensations, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness. These 5 aggregates, as the Buddha called them, are constantly arising and passing away. The body you have now is not the same body you had as a child. The thoughts you're thinking now will be different from the thoughts you'll think tomorrow. The emotions you feel are constantly shifting. Where in all this change is the permanent self? The Buddha suggested that our suffering comes largely from trying to maintain and protect something that doesn't actually exist in the way we think it does. We build our entire lives around defending and promoting this self, accumulating things for it, creating an image of it, worrying about its future, regretting its past. But this self we're so concerned about is like a rainbow, beautiful and appearing solid from a distance, but actually just light and water vapor without substance, unable to be grasped. This teaching might seem abstract or philosophical, but it has profound practical implications for sleep and peace. Much of what keeps us awake at night is concern about the self, worry about what others think of us, replaying moments when we felt embarrassed or diminished, planning how to make ourselves look good or avoid looking bad, dwelling on hurts to our pride or challenges to our self-image. All of this mental activity is exhausting, and all of it rests on the assumption that there's a solid self that needs defending and promoting. But what if you could rest from all that effort? What if, just for tonight, you could let go of maintaining and defending your self-image? What if you could stop worrying about whether you're good enough, successful enough, attractive enough, intelligent enough? What if you could release the endless internal narrative about who you are and whether that's okay? This is not a loss, but a profound relief. It's like setting down a heavy burden you've been carrying so long you forgot it was possible to put it down. The Buddha pointed out that the sense of self is constructed each moment through identification. We experience a sensation and immediately think, my sensation. We have a thought and think, my thought. We own our experiences, claiming them as part of our identity. But the Buddha suggested a different possibility. What if you simply experienced sensations without claiming them? What if thoughts arose without you identifying with them? What if emotions flowed through without you taking them personally? This is not dissociation or denial. It's a lighter, freer way of being, allowing experiences to arise and pass like weather moving through the sky. The sky isn't threatened by storms, doesn't claim the clouds as part of itself, doesn't try to hold onto sunny days. It simply allows all weather to pass through. You can relate to your experiences in this same way, remaining as the spacious awareness in which all experiences appear, without grasping at pleasant ones or pushing away unpleasant ones, without building a solid sense of self from the shifting materials of experience. Tonight, as you move towards sleep, you have a beautiful opportunity to practice this lighter way of being. You can allow thoughts to arise without claiming them as your thoughts or judging yourself for having them. You can notice sensations in your body without turning them into problems that you need to fix. You can observe the process of falling asleep without a self who is trying to accomplish it or worrying about doing it right. Just let the process unfold naturally, like a flower opening in response to warmth, like water finding its way downhill, like the natural settling that happens when you stop stirring a pot of muddy water. No self is needed to make sleep happen. In fact, the sense of self, the one who tries and worries and monitors, is often exactly what prevents sleep from coming naturally. When you release identification with that self, even temporarily, sleep becomes effortless. The Buddha told a story about two monks who were traveling together and came to a river. The younger monk was very worried about crossing, fearing the current and the depth of the water. The older monk simply walked into the river, crossed to the other side, and waited. The younger monk stood on the bank, analysing the river, imagining all the things that could go wrong, getting more and more anxious. Finally, he called across to the older monk. "How did you do that? How did you cross so easily?" The older monk replied, "I didn't cross. Crossing happened." When you stop being someone who might fail at crossing and simply allow the process of crossing to occur, it becomes effortless. This story applies perfectly to sleep. When you're lying awake trying to fall asleep, you're being someone who might fail at this task, someone who has a history of insomnia or difficulty sleeping, someone who needs to accomplish the goal of falling asleep. All this selfing, as Buddhists call it, creates tension. But when you drop the self who is trying to sleep and simply allow the process of sleep to occur in its own time, without monitoring or managing, you become like the older monk who let crossing happen naturally. The Buddha's teaching on anatta, on not self, ultimately points to a profound freedom. When you're not constantly maintaining and defending a self, you have so much more energy available. When you're not taking everything personally, life becomes much less stressful. When you're not comparing yourself to others or worrying about your self-image, you can be more genuinely present to what's actually happening. This freedom is not cold or distant. In fact, when you're less self-focused, you become more capable of genuine connection with others, more available to love and be loved, more responsive to the beauty and pain of the world. The Buddha himself, after his enlightenment, devoted 45 years to teaching others, traveling constantly despite his aging body, giving freely of his wisdom and compassion. He could do this precisely because he wasn't burdened by a heavy sense of self. He had realized his true nature, which was much vaster than any personal identity, and from that realization flowed natural compassion and the wish to help others discover the same freedom. As you rest here now, see if you can taste this freedom, even for a moment. Can you experience sensations without claiming them? Can you notice thoughts without identifying with them? Can you simply be aware without being someone in particular who is aware? This is not a difficult practice requiring years of training. It's actually the most natural thing, the relaxing of a habit of identification that has become so automatic you don't realize you're doing it. Right now, in this moment, awareness is happening. Sensations are arising, sounds are being heard. But is a solid, separate self necessary for any of this? Or is there simply experiencing without an experiencer? Simply awareness without someone who is aware? Simply being without a separate entity who is being? Rest in this openness, this spaciousness, this freedom from the burden of selfing. Let it show you how light and easy existence can be when you're not carrying the heavy weight of a self that needs constant maintenance and defense. Another of the Buddha's core teachings is about impermanence, anicca in Pali. Everything that arises passes away. Everything that comes together falls apart. Everything that is born dies. This includes not just obvious things like bodies and civilizations, but also thoughts, emotions, sensations, relationships, moments. Nothing lasts. Nothing can be held onto forever. For many people, this teaching sounds depressing. If nothing lasts, what's the point of anything? Why love if love will end? Why create if creations will crumble? Why enjoy anything if enjoyment is temporary? But the Buddha taught that understanding impermanence deeply actually leads to peace, not despair. When you truly accept that nothing lasts, you stop clinging so tightly. You stop demanding that pleasant experiences continue forever. You stop being shocked and devastated when things change, as they inevitably will. You learn to appreciate things while they're here without bitterness about their eventual passing. You become like someone watching clouds or a sunset, able to appreciate the beauty fully precisely because you know it's temporary, not trying to grasp it or make it permanent, simply present to it while it lasts. This teaching about impermanence is especially relevant to sleep. Sleep itself is impermanent. Each night is different. Sometimes sleep comes easily, sometimes with difficulty. Sometimes dreams are pleasant, sometimes disturbing. Sometimes you sleep deeply, sometimes lightly. When you truly accept this impermanence, you stop demanding that every night's sleep be perfect. You stop panicking when sleep doesn't come immediately, knowing that this too is temporary, that sleep will eventually arrive. You stop clinging to memories of nights when you slept well, wishing every night could be like that. You meet each night fresh, willing to accept whatever kind of sleep arises, knowing that tomorrow night will be different anyway. This acceptance paradoxically makes sleep easier. When you're not fighting against the reality of impermanence, when you're not demanding that sleep be a certain way, your nervous system relaxes. The very acceptance of whatever is happening creates the conditions for what you desire to occur. The Buddha taught that there are three characteristics that mark all conditioned existence. We've touched on two of them, dukkha or unsatisfactoriness, and anicca or impermanence. The third is anatta, not self, which we've already explored. These three characteristics, when truly understood, are said to be the gateway to liberation. When you see deeply that all experiences are unsatisfying in the long run because they change and because there's no permanent self to possess them, you naturally begin to let go of clinging. This letting go is not a loss, but a release into freedom. You stop trying to build a permanent happiness from impermanent materials. You stop trying to construct a solid self from constantly changing experiences. Instead, you rest in the awareness that observes all these changes without being changed by them. You find your home in the deathless, as the Buddha called it, the awareness that is not born and does not die, that is not affected by the constant arising and passing of phenomena. Tonight, you can practice seeing impermanence directly. Notice how each breath is different. The inhale is not the same as the exhale. This breath is not the same as the last breath. Each sensation in your body arises and passes away. Even what seems like a constant sensation, like the feeling of pressure where your body meets the bed, is actually a stream of constantly arising and passing sensations, like a movie that appears continuous but is actually made of separate frames. Each sound arises from silence and returns to silence. Each thought appears from nowhere and dissolves back into nowhere. When you pay close attention, you see that nothing is static. Everything is a flowing river, a dancing process, a constant becoming and dissolving. This direct perception of impermanence can be deeply liberating. You realize that if everything passes, then difficult experiences will pass too. The anxiety you're feeling will pass. The physical discomfort will pass. The racing thoughts will pass. You don't have to make them go away. You simply have to wait, watching with patient attention, and they will pass on their own. This understanding brings a quality of patience and trust that is very conducive to sleep. The Buddha often used the metaphor of a river to point to the nature of reality. You cannot step into the same river twice, he would say, borrowing from earlier philosophers. The water is constantly flowing, constantly changing. But he went further. Not only can you not step into the same river twice, you cannot step into it once, because by the time you complete the step, both the river and you have changed. The river that your foot enters is not the same river that your foot rests in a moment later. And the you who began the step is not the same you who completes it. Every cell in your body is engaged in constant process. Molecules are being exchanged with the environment. Chemical reactions are occurring. Nerve impulses are firing. You are not a thing but a process, a verb rather than a noun, a constant becoming rather than a static being. When you see this clearly, the fear of change diminishes. Change is not something that happens to you. Change is what you are. The river doesn't fear flowing. That's its nature. In the same way, you need not fear the constant flow of experience. That's your nature. There's a famous story about a woman who came to the Buddha carrying her dead child. She had gone mad with grief and refused to accept that her baby was dead. She begged the Buddha to bring the child back to life. The Buddha, with great compassion, told her he could help, but first she must bring him a mustard seed from a household where no one has ever died. The woman went from house to house throughout the village, and everywhere she heard the same story. We have lost a father, we have lost a mother, we have lost a child. In every home, death had visited. Slowly, understanding dawned. Death is not a personal tragedy that happened uniquely to her. Death is universal, part of the fabric of existence, something every being must face. She returned to the Buddha transformed, ready to hear his teachings on impermanence, ready to begin the work of accepting what cannot be changed while finding peace in the midst of loss. The Buddha didn't remove her suffering through magic. He helped her understand suffering in a way that made it bearable, that connected her to all beings through shared vulnerability, that opened her heart to compassion rather than closing it in bitter isolation. This story reminds us that the Buddha's teachings are not about denying difficult realities or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. They're about understanding suffering so deeply that we find freedom even in its midst. The first noble truth acknowledges that suffering exists. The Buddha never taught that we should pretend to be happy when we're sad, or claim everything is perfect when we're struggling. Instead, he taught us to meet our suffering with wisdom and compassion, to understand its causes, to know that it can end, and to walk the path that leads to its ending. This honest, clear-eyed approach to suffering is deeply healing. When you stop fighting against difficulty and instead meet it with understanding, when you stop feeling victimized by pain and instead see it as part of the universal human experience, something in you relaxes. You can breathe into the difficulty rather than bracing against it. You can open to it rather than closing down. And in that opening, in that willingness to be present even to pain, you discover a strength and peace you didn't know you possessed. As you lie here tonight, perhaps there is some suffering you're carrying, some physical pain or emotional hurt or situational difficulty that has been weighing on you. Instead of trying to push it away or fix it or think your way out of it, what if you could simply acknowledge it with compassion? What if you could say to yourself, this is suffering, this is hard, and in this moment, I hold myself with kindness. The Buddha taught that when we meet our suffering with compassion rather than judgment or resistance, its power to disturb us diminishes. The pain might not disappear, but our relationship to it changes. We become less overwhelmed, more able to cope, more connected to our inner resources. This is not a betrayal of ourselves or a weak acceptance of unacceptable situations. It's a wise recognition that fighting against what already is only creates additional suffering. From this place of compassionate acceptance, we can then take whatever skillful action might be possible. But first, we stop the war with reality. First, we make peace with what is. One of the Buddha's most compassionate teachings concerns working with difficulty and pain. He taught that suffering has two components. There is the unavoidable pain of existence, what he called the first arrow. This includes physical pain, loss, aging, illness, death, disappointment. These experiences are part of being alive in a body, part of being connected to others who we will lose, part of living in a world of constant change. The first arrow is not optional, it's part of the human experience. But then there is the second arrow, which is our response to the first arrow. This is the suffering we add through our resistance, our stories about why this shouldn't be happening, our judgment of ourselves for experiencing pain, our belief that we're being singled out for misfortune, our inability to accept what is. The second arrow is optional. It's where most of our suffering actually comes from. The Buddha's path is not about avoiding the first arrow, which would be impossible. It's about not shooting the second arrow, about learning to meet life's unavoidable difficulties without adding layers of resistance and reactivity that multiply our suffering unnecessarily. Think about the last time you experienced physical pain, perhaps a headache or sore muscles or an injury. Notice how the actual sensation of pain was made worse by your mental response. You probably thought things like, "This is terrible. When will it end? I can't stand this. Why is this happening to me?" These thoughts are the second arrow, the suffering added to pain. The pain itself, the raw physical sensation, is just sensation, uncomfortable but not necessarily unbearable. It's the story about the pain that makes it unbearable. The Buddha taught a radical approach to pain. Instead of fighting it or being overwhelmed by it, we can meet it with mindful awareness. We can feel the actual sensations without the overlay of panicked thoughts. We can notice where exactly the pain is located, what it feels like, how it changes from moment to moment. When we do this, something interesting happens. The pain often becomes less intense, or at least less overwhelming. By removing the second arrow, by meeting pain with awareness rather than resistance, we discover that we're actually capable of being with difficult experiences without falling apart. This same principle applies to emotional pain. When you experience sadness or anxiety or frustration, notice how much of your suffering comes not from the emotion itself, but from your thoughts about the emotion. You might think, "I shouldn't feel this way. What's wrong with me? I'm so weak. This feeling will never end. I can't handle this." These thoughts are the second arrow. The original emotion, the first arrow, is just energy moving through your body, sensations in your chest or throat or belly, perhaps some tears or tension. When you can meet the emotion with simple awareness, feeling it without the story, it moves through much more quickly. Emotions are designed to move. The word itself comes from Latin meaning to move out. But we block this natural movement by resisting what we feel, by judging ourselves for feeling it, by creating elaborate stories about what it means. The Buddha's teaching on the two arrows gives us permission to feel what we feel without adding layers of suffering on top. Tonight, if there are any uncomfortable sensations in your body or any difficult emotions present, see if you can practice working with the first arrow without adding the second. If your body feels tense or sore, can you simply feel the sensations without the thought that they shouldn't be there? If your mind feels anxious or sad, can you allow the feeling without judging yourself for having it? This doesn't mean you enjoy discomfort or pretend it's not there. It means you stop fighting against what's already present. You stop telling yourself stories about how wrong it is that you feel this way. You simply acknowledge, with compassion, this is what's arising right now. This practice immediately reduces suffering because you're no longer multiplying one difficulty into many through resistance and judgment. You're meeting what is with wisdom and kindness, which is the essence of the Buddha's path. The Buddha taught extensively about what prevents peace and what cultivates it. He identified 3 root causes of suffering, what are called the 3 poisons. These are greed or grasping, aversion or pushing away, and delusion or not seeing clearly. All suffering, he taught, can be traced back to one or more of these roots. Greed is the mind that grasps, that wants more, that is never satisfied, that thinks happiness will come from acquiring or achieving or experiencing something it doesn't currently have. Aversion is the mind that pushes away, that fights against what is, that thinks happiness will come from eliminating or escaping or avoiding something that is present. Delusion is not seeing clearly, not understanding how things actually are, being confused about the nature of reality and lost in fantasy or wrong view. These 3 poisons work together to keep us trapped in suffering. We grasp at what we think will make us happy. push away what we think will make us unhappy, and don't see clearly that both these movements create suffering rather than ending it. The antidotes to these three poisons are generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Generosity is the opposite of greed, the practice of giving rather than grasping, of opening the hand rather than clenching it. Loving kindness is the opposite of aversion, meeting everything with a basic friendliness rather than hostility. Wisdom is the opposite of delusion, seeing clearly how things actually are rather than how we wish they were or fear they might be. The Buddha taught that we can deliberately cultivate these wholesome qualities to counteract the unwholesome tendencies that cause suffering. This cultivation is not a struggle or a war against parts of ourselves. It's more like gardening, pulling up the weeds that choke the garden and planting seeds that will produce flowers and fruit. Every time you choose generosity over greed, kindness over aversion, wisdom over delusion, you strengthen those wholesome qualities and weaken the unwholesome ones. Over time, the garden of your mind becomes a more peaceful and beautiful place. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you might reflect on how these poisons might have shown up during your day. Perhaps there were moments of grasping, wanting something you didn't have, feeling unsatisfied with what was present. Maybe there were moments of aversion, feeling annoyed or angry, wishing circumstances were different. Possibly there were moments of delusion, not seeing clearly, being caught in fantasy or worry or misunderstanding. Instead of judging yourself for these very human tendencies, you can simply acknowledge them with compassion. This is what minds do. This is the conditioned pattern I'm working with, and then you can consciously cultivate the antidotes. You might reflect with appreciation on moments when you were generous today, when you gave something to someone or shared or helped. You might remember moments of kindness, times when you were patient or friendly or compassionate. You might acknowledge times when you saw clearly, when wisdom was present, when you understood something true about yourself or your situation. By ending your day with this kind of reflection, you water the seeds of wholesome qualities and carry them into your sleep. The Buddha taught that the mind in its untrained state is like a wild horse, running wherever it wants, controlled by impulses and reactions and habitual patterns. But through practice, through patient training, the mind can become like a well-trained horse that responds to gentle guidance, that goes where you direct it, that serves your highest intentions rather than dragging you wherever its conditioned habits lead. This training of the mind is not cruel or violent. It's done with kindness and patience, the way you might train a beloved animal. When the mind wanders, you gently bring it back. When it gets caught in unhelpful patterns, you kindly redirect it. Over time, the mind becomes more stable, more concentrated, more able to rest where you place it. This trained quality of mind is what allows deep meditation and also what allows deep sleep. When your mind is wild and untrained, it runs all night, dragging you through endless thoughts and worries and dreams. But when your mind has been trained through practice, it can rest peacefully, remaining in the tranquil state you guide it to. One of the most powerful practices the Buddha taught for training the mind is mindfulness of breathing. This simple practice has been used for over 2,000 years by millions of practitioners and has proven its power to calm the mind and develop concentration. The practice is very simple. You place your attention on the sensations of breathing, and whenever you notice your attention has wandered, you gently bring it back. That's it. The breath is always available, always present, always happening right now. It serves as an anchor that holds you in the present moment, preventing the mind from drifting into past or future. As you practice returning attention to breath over and over, you develop the mental muscle of concentration, the ability to place attention where you choose and keep it there. This ability is useful not just in meditation but in every area of life, and it's especially useful for sleep. When you can anchor your attention in the peaceful sensations of breathing, your mind stops racing and your body receives the signal that it's safe to rest. Let's practice this together now. Bring your attention to wherever you feel the breath most clearly in your body. This might be at the nostrils, feeling the air moving in and out. It might be at the chest, feeling the rise and fall. It might be at the belly, feeling the gentle expansion and contraction. Choose one place and let your attention rest there. You don't need to control the breath or breathe in any special way. Simply observe the natural breathing that's already happening. Feel one complete breath from the beginning of the inhale to the end of the exhale. Then feel another breath and another. If your mind wanders, which it will, this is not a mistake or failure. This is what minds do. The practice is noticing that the mind has wandered and gently bringing attention back to the breath, without judgment, without frustration. With patient kindness, you might show a small child who keeps wandering off. Each time you notice wandering and return to breath, you're strengthening your concentration, training your mind in this gentle, powerful way. Continue resting your attention on the breath as we explore more teachings. Let the breath be like a golden thread that keeps you connected to the present moment, preventing you from getting lost in the stories and worries that the mind habitually creates. Notice how peaceful it is to simply breathe, to simply be present to this most basic act of being alive. The breath requires nothing from you, no effort, no accomplishment, no becoming something other than what you are. It simply breathes you, the way the ocean waves itself, the way the heart beats itself. You don't have to make breathing happen. You simply allow it, observe it, rest in it. This quality of allowing, of receiving rather than doing, is the perfect preparation for sleep. Sleep also cannot be forced or achieved. It can only be allowed, received, surrendered to. The Buddha spoke often about the quality of equanimity, that balanced state of mind that remains steady regardless of circumstances. Equanimity is not indifference or coldness. It's not pretending that everything is fine or that all outcomes are equal. It's a deep understanding that life includes both pleasant and unpleasant experiences, that change is constant, and that clinging to what we like or pushing away what we don't like only creates suffering. When equanimity is present, you can be fully engaged with life while not being thrown off balance by life's ups and downs. You're like a mountain that stands firm while weather patterns move across its surface, storms and sunshine, wind and calm. The mountain is not indifferent to the weather. It's simply stable, not disturbed by changes that are by nature temporary. This quality of equanimity is deeply peaceful. When you don't need every experience to be pleasant, when you can accept the natural mix of comfortable and uncomfortable that life brings, you stop fighting reality and find a profound ease. Cultivating equanimity is especially important for sleep. If you need conditions to be perfect before you can sleep, you'll spend many nights awake, because perfect conditions are rare. There will always be some noise or discomfort or worry that your mind could focus on as a reason not to sleep. But when you develop equanimity, you can sleep under various conditions, accepting what is rather than demanding what isn't. The bed might not be as comfortable as you'd like, but it's comfortable enough. There might be some noise, but it's manageable. Your body might have some discomfort, but it's bearable. Your mind might have some thoughts, but they don't have to prevent sleep. This accepting, allowing quality creates the internal conditions for sleep to arise naturally. You're no longer creating obstacles through resistance and demands for perfect conditions. You're meeting what is with wise acceptance, which is the soil in which peace grows. The Buddha also taught about the power of intention. He said that karma, often misunderstood as fate or predetermined destiny, is actually about intention and action. What you intend, what you choose, what you do, creates consequences that shape your future experience. This is not a system of punishment and reward handed down by some cosmic judge. It's simply the natural law of cause and effect operating in the moral and mental sphere. When you act with intentions rooted in greed, hatred, or delusion, you create suffering for yourself and others. When you act with intentions rooted in generosity, love, and wisdom, you create happiness for yourself and others. This is not because good people deserve rewards and bad people deserve punishment. It's because wholesome actions naturally lead to wholesome results, and unwholesome actions naturally lead to unwholesome results. Understanding this empowers you. You're not a victim of random fate. You're participating in creating your experience through your choices and intentions. This teaching about karma and intention is relevant to your sleep practice. What intentions do you bring to this time before sleep? If your intention is to worry about tomorrow, your mind will oblige by generating worries. If your intention is to replay the difficulties of today, your mind will provide an endless highlight reel of problems. But if your intention is to cultivate peace, to practice letting go, to prepare for restorative sleep, your mind will move in that direction. The Buddha taught that intention is like a seed. Whatever seed you plant through your intention is what will grow in the field of your consciousness. Tonight, consciously set an intention for peace, for deep rest, for surrender to sleep. You might say to yourself, May I release this day and rest deeply. May I let go of all that no longer serves. May I sleep in peace and wake refreshed. This intention, clearly set, begins to shape your experience immediately. Your mind has a direction, a purpose, a wholesome goal to move toward. This gives the mind something useful to do rather than wandering into its habitual patterns of worry and replay. The Buddha taught that there are two kinds of happiness. There is the happiness that depends on pleasant conditions, on getting what we want, on circumstances going our way. This happiness is wonderful but unstable because conditions are always changing. What we have can be lost. What we enjoy will eventually end. People we love will die or leave. Success turns to failure. Youth gives way to age. This doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy conditional happiness. We should appreciate it fully while it's here, but we should also understand its nature, its impermanence, its inability to provide lasting satisfaction. The second kind of happiness, what the Buddha called the highest happiness, doesn't depend on conditions. It arises from wisdom, from virtue, from a well-trained mind, from the peace that comes from not being at war with reality. This happiness remains stable regardless of whether conditions are pleasant or unpleasant. It's the happiness of the freed heart, the liberated mind, the awakened consciousness. As you practice the Buddha's teachings night after night, you begin to discover this second kind of happiness. You find that you can be at peace even when conditions aren't perfect, that you can rest even when there are noises or discomforts, that you can feel fundamentally okay even when you're facing challenges. This is not because you've fixed all your problems or created perfect circumstances. It's because you've developed inner resources, qualities of mind and heart that remain stable even as external conditions fluctuate. This is the true security the Buddha points to, not the false security of trying to control everything, but the real security of knowing you can meet whatever arises with wisdom and compassion. This inner security allows the deepest sleep, because you're not vigilantly trying to maintain control or prevent disaster. You can truly let go, knowing that your inner resources will be there when you wake, ready to meet the new day skillfully. One of the Buddha's most practical teachings concerns what he called right speech. He taught that our words have power, that they create karma, that they affect both ourselves and others. Right speech means speaking truthfully but also kindly. It means saying what is useful and helpful, and remaining silent when speech would cause harm without benefit. It means avoiding lies, harsh words, gossip, and meaningless chatter. This teaching extends to how we speak to ourselves in the privacy of our own minds. The internal dialogue we maintain throughout the day, and especially as we try to fall asleep, has profound effects on our peace and well-being. If you speak to yourself harshly, criticizing every mistake, judging every flaw, demanding impossible perfection, you create an internal environment of stress and fear. But if you speak to yourself with kindness, offering encouragement and understanding, acknowledging both your strengths and your areas for growth with balanced perspective, you create an internal environment of safety and peace. Tonight, pay attention to how you speak to yourself as you settle towards sleep. Do you criticize yourself for not falling asleep fast enough? Do you judge yourself for having an active mind? Do you tell yourself stories about what's wrong with you or why you can't rest? These harsh words are obstacles to peace. They're the second arrow, suffering added to whatever difficulty might already be present. Instead, try speaking to yourself the way you might speak to a beloved friend or a small child you care for deeply. Offer yourself encouragement. Tell yourself it's okay that sleep is taking time to come. Remind yourself that you're doing your best. Acknowledge that you're learning new skills and that learning takes time. This kind internal speech creates the conditions for peace to arise. Your nervous system hears these kind words and begins to relax, receiving the message that you're safe, that you're accepted, that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of rest. The Buddha taught a beautiful practice called the reflection on the heavenly messengers. These messengers are old age, illness, and death, the three realities that Siddhartha encountered when he first left the palace, the realities that motivated his spiritual search. The practice is to regularly contemplate these truths, not in a morbid or depressing way, but as a way to put life in perspective, to remember what truly matters, to not waste the precious time we have. When you remember that you will age, that your body will eventually fail, that death will come, it changes your priorities. The petty concerns that usually dominate attention fade in importance. The grudges you've been holding seem less worth the energy. The approval you've been seeking seems less essential. What remains is what truly matters: love, kindness, wisdom, connection, presence, peace. The Buddha taught that remembering death is not depressing, but liberating. It wakes you up from the sleepwalk of ordinary life. It helps you appreciate each moment, each person, each breath. It motivates you to practice now, rather than putting it off until some imaginary future when conditions will be better. As you lie here tonight, contemplating sleep, you might also contemplate that each night's sleep is a practiced death, a rehearsal for the final letting go that will come at life's end. This is not meant to frighten you, but to help you see sleep as sacred, as an opportunity to practice surrender, to practice letting go of control, to practice trusting in something larger than your small self. When you can face the small death of sleep with peace, when you can surrender into unconsciousness without fear, you develop the capacity to eventually face the larger death with that same peace. Many spiritual traditions teach that how we live determines how we die, and how we sleep determines how we live. By learning to sleep in peace, by developing the capacity to let go completely while trusting in the process, you're developing spiritual skills that will serve you throughout life, and especially at life's end. There is a story about a time when the Buddha was teaching a large group of monks. He held up a flower, saying nothing, simply holding it for all to see. The monks were confused, waiting for the teaching to begin. But one monk, Mahakashyapa, saw the flower and smiled. In that smile, the Buddha recognized that Mahakashyapa had understood something profound that cannot be transmitted through words. The Buddha said, "I have the true Dharma I, the marvelous mind of Nirvana, the true form of the formless, the subtle Dharma gate that does not rest on words but is transmitted outside the teachings. This I have entrusted to Mahakashyapa." This story became famous as an example of transmission beyond words, understanding that comes not from explanation but from direct seeing. What did Mahakashyapa understand when he saw the flower? Perhaps he saw the simple suchness of the flower, its perfect being just as it is, without needing to be anything other than what it is. Perhaps he saw the teaching of impermanence, knowing the flower would soon wilt and die. Perhaps he saw his own Buddha nature reflected in the flower's Buddha nature. Whatever he saw, it was not something that could be captured in concepts or transmitted through explanations. It could only be pointed to, and the pointing was the holding up of the flower. Tonight, you too can practice this kind of direct seeing, this understanding beyond words. Instead of thinking about peace, you can be peace. Instead of analyzing rest, you can be rest. Instead of understanding concepts about letting go, you can actually let go. The teachings offered here are like the Buddha's flower, pointers towards something that cannot be fully captured in language. Don't try to grasp the teachings intellectually or remember them all. Let them work on you at a deeper level. Let them guide you into direct experience of what they're pointing toward. The peace the Buddha discovered is not a philosophy or a belief system. It's a living reality, available in this very moment, accessible through direct seeing rather than through thinking about seeing. The Buddha taught his students to be lamps unto themselves, to not rely on external authority, but to test the teachings through their own experience. He said, "Do not believe something just because I said it, or because it's written in ancient texts, or because it's traditional, or because many people believe it. Test the teachings for yourself. See if they lead to peace and wisdom in your own direct experience. If they do, follow them. If they don't, abandon them." This was revolutionary teaching in his time and remains revolutionary today. The Buddha was not asking for blind faith or obedience to dogma. He was inviting each person to become a scientist of consciousness, conducting experiments in the laboratory of their own mind and heart, discovering truth through direct investigation rather than accepting it second-hand. Tonight, you are conducting such an experiment. Does letting go lead to peace in your experience? Does mindful awareness of breath calm your nervous system? Does releasing judgment toward yourself create more ease? Does compassion toward your own suffering reduce that suffering? Don't take anyone's word for it, not even the Buddha's. See for yourself. Let your own experience be the teacher. This is the beauty of the Buddha's path. It's not about forcing yourself to believe things that don't match your experience. It's about clearly seeing what is true, what works, what leads from suffering to peace. And you are the one who must see. No one can see for you. No one can practice for you. No one can discover peace on your behalf. You must walk the path yourself, though the Buddha's teachings can serve as a map, showing the way that countless others have successfully walked. There is a famous story of a student who asked the Buddha, "What happens after death? Does the enlightened one continue to exist, or cease to exist, or both, or neither?" The Buddha remained silent. The student asked again and again, but the Buddha would not answer. Finally, the Buddha explained his silence with a parable. Imagine, he said, that you've been shot with a poisoned arrow. A surgeon comes to remove it, but before you'll let him help, you insist on knowing who shot the arrow, what kind of wood the arrow is made from, what type of feathers, what kind of poison. While you're asking all these questions, the poison spreads and you die. The practical question is not where the arrow came from, but how to remove it and treat the wound. In the same way, the Buddha taught, the practical question is not what happens after death, but how to end suffering now. Speculative questions about metaphysics might be interesting, but they don't lead to liberation. The Buddha focused only on what is useful for ending suffering, leaving aside questions that, however interesting, don't contribute to that goal. This teaching is relevant to your practice tonight. Your mind might want to ask many questions. Am I doing this right? Will this really help me sleep? What if I can't let go? What if these teachings don't work for me? These questions are like asking about the arrow's origin while the poison spreads. The practical question is, can I let go right now? Can I be present to this breath? Can I soften my body in this moment? Can I meet whatever arises with compassion rather than judgment? These are the questions that matter, the ones that lead directly to peace. The other questions, however interesting, can wait until tomorrow. Right now, the only thing that matters is this moment, this breath, this opportunity to choose peace over struggle, acceptance over resistance, presence over distraction. The Buddha taught that there are 4 foundations of mindfulness, 4 arenas where we can practice clear awareness. The first is mindfulness of body, bringing conscious attention to physical sensations, posture, movement, breath. The second is mindfulness of feelings, not emotions, but the quality of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that colors every experience. The third is mindfulness of mind, observing the states of consciousness that arise, whether the mind is calm or agitated, concentrated or scattered, spacious or contracted. The fourth is mindfulness of dharmas, which can mean both mental objects like thoughts and also the laws or principles that govern experience. By developing mindfulness in these 4 areas, we cultivate the clear seeing that leads to liberation. Tonight, as you rest here, you can practice all 4 foundations. Notice your body, the sensations present, the feeling of weight and temperature and texture. Notice the feeling tone of your experience. Is this moment pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Notice the state of your mind. Is it calm or busy, clear or confused, at ease or stressed? Notice the thoughts that arise and pass away, observing them without getting caught in their content. This practice of mindfulness might seem like it would keep you awake rather than help you sleep, but actually the opposite is true. When you practice mindfulness, you're interrupting the habit of getting lost in thought, of being swept away by the mind's endless commentary and story-making. You're anchoring yourself in present moment experience, which is much simpler and less agitating than the stories the mind creates. The body sensations in this moment are just sensations. The sounds are just sounds. The breath is just breath. When you meet experience this directly, without elaborating it into drama and story, it loses its power to disturb you. You're no longer feeding the fire of mental activity with the fuel of identification and elaboration. The fire naturally dies down, and in that quieting, sleep becomes possible. One of the Buddha's closest disciples was his cousin Ananda, who served as his attendant for many years. Ananda was known for his devotion and his excellent memory. He memorized all of the Buddha's teachings and later played a crucial role in preserving them for future generations. But despite being constantly in the Buddha's presence, despite hearing every teaching, Ananda did not become enlightened during the Buddha's lifetime. After the Buddha's death, when the elder disciples gathered to recite and preserve the teachings, they decided that only enlightened monks should participate. Ananda was heartbroken. He had served the Buddha faithfully for decades, yet he was still not awakened. That night, determined to attain enlightenment before the council began, he practiced with fierce dedication. He meditated all night, alternating between sitting and walking meditation. As dawn approached, he was exhausted but still not enlightened. He decided to lie down for a moment to rest, and in that moment between sitting upright and lying down, between effort and surrender, between trying and letting go, enlightenment came. He realized what he needed to understand in the split second of release, of giving up the struggle, of simply allowing. This story holds a profound teaching for your practice tonight. Often we try too hard to fall asleep, to force peace to come. to make ourselves relax. This very trying creates tension that prevents what we seek. Like Ananda, we must learn the balance between effort and surrender, between practice and letting go. You can practice all the techniques, all the methods, all the mindfulness and compassion and letting go that the Buddha taught. But at some point, you must stop practicing and simply allow. You must release even the effort to be peaceful and simply rest in what is. This is the paradox of spiritual practice. You must try and you must stop trying. You must practice and you must go beyond practice. You must make effort and you must surrender effort. The wisdom is knowing when to do which, when to apply technique and when to release it, when to maintain awareness and when to let even awareness dissolve into sleep. The Buddha taught about what he called the 7 factors of enlightenment, 7 qualities that, when developed, lead naturally to awakening. These are mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. What's interesting is that these factors balance each other. Some are energizing, like investigation and effort. Others are calming, like tranquility and concentration. Mindfulness and equanimity balance them all. The art of practice is knowing which factors to cultivate in any given moment. If your mind is dull and foggy, you cultivate the energizing factors, bringing more interest and investigation to your experience. If your mind is agitated and restless, you cultivate the calming factors, bringing more tranquility and steadiness. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you're clearly working with the calming factors. You're cultivating tranquility through relaxation and letting go. You're developing concentration by resting attention on breath or on these teachings. You're nurturing equanimity by accepting whatever arises without judgment or resistance. These calming factors naturally lead towards sleep. They create the internal conditions that allow consciousness to release its grip on waking awareness and descend into rest. There is a beautiful teaching in Buddhism about the near enemies of positive qualities. A near enemy is something that looks like a virtue but is actually its opposite. For example, the near enemy of compassion is pity. Pity looks like compassion, but actually involves feeling superior to the person who is suffering, creating separation rather than connection. The near enemy of equanimity is indifference. Indifference looks like equanimity, like balanced acceptance, but actually involves not caring, numbing out, disconnecting. True equanimity involves caring deeply while maintaining wise perspective. The near enemy of loving kindness is attachment. Attachment can feel like love, but it's actually a grasping that wants to possess the other for one's own satisfaction. True loving kindness wants the genuine happiness of the other, even if that doesn't serve your personal desires. Understanding these near enemies helps refine practice, ensuring we're actually cultivating what we think we are rather than its counterfeit. This teaching is relevant to sleep practice. The near enemy of relaxation is collapse. Collapse looks like letting go, like release, but it's actually a giving up, a depression of energy, a helpless resignation. True relaxation maintains a quality of alertness even as it releases tension. The near enemy of acceptance is resignation. Resignation looks like peace with what is, but it's actually a defeated belief that nothing can change. True acceptance involves meeting what is without resistance while remaining open to skillful action. As you practice tonight, notice if you're actually relaxing or collapsing, accepting or resigning. True peace has a quality of aliveness, of spaciousness, of gentle awareness. If you notice you've moved into a near enemy, simply recognize it without judgment and gently redirect toward the genuine quality you're cultivating. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is not an all-or-nothing proposition. It's not that you're completely unenlightened one moment and fully awakened the next. Rather, awakening happens gradually, in stages, like the dawn light slowly brightening until full day arrives. He described specific stages of awakening, levels of attainment that mark progress on the path. The first stage is called stream entry, when you have direct insight into the true nature of reality and can never again completely forget what you've seen. You've entered the stream that will inevitably carry you to full awakening. The second and third stages involve the progressive weakening and eventually elimination of greed, hatred, and delusion. The fourth stage is full enlightenment, the complete ending of suffering, unshakable peace and freedom. The Buddha taught that anyone who enters the stream will reach full awakening within 7 lifetimes at most. This is encouraging. It means your practice is not in vain. Every moment of mindfulness, every choice for compassion over judgment, every instance of letting go rather than grasping moves you along the path toward liberation. Tonight, you don't need to worry about what stage you're at or how many lifetimes it will take to fully awaken. You simply practice here and now, in this moment, doing what you can with the understanding you currently have. Every moment of practice matters. Every choice for peace over struggle is significant. You're not wasting your time lying here listening to these teachings. You're participating in the most important work possible, the liberation of consciousness from suffering. The Buddha taught that there is no higher use of human life than the cultivation of wisdom and compassion. Everything else, all our usual concerns about success and status and acquisition, pales in comparison. Tonight, for this time, you're dedicating yourself to what truly matters, not achieving or becoming, but simply being present, being aware, being at peace. This is noble work. This is the path that leads to genuine fulfillment. The Buddha often used metaphors from nature to point to spiritual truths. He spoke of the lotus flower that grows in muddy water, but blooms pure and unstained. The mud is not the opposite of the flower, but its necessary ground. Without the mud, there would be no lotus. In the same way, our difficulties and challenges are not obstacles to awakening, but its necessary ground. Your struggles with sleep, with racing mind, with worry and stress, these are not signs that you're failing. They're the mud in which the lotus of your wisdom is growing. Without these challenges, you wouldn't be motivated to practice. You wouldn't develop the understanding and compassion that come from meeting difficulties skillfully. The Buddha himself wouldn't have awakened if he hadn't first struggled with suffering. His enlightenment grew directly from his willingness to face pain fully and understand it deeply. Your peace will grow from your willingness to meet your own struggles with wisdom and compassion rather than judgment and avoidance. The Buddha taught extensively about karma, but his teaching is often misunderstood. Karma doesn't mean fate or predestination. It doesn't mean that everything that happens to you is punishment for past actions. Karma simply means action and its consequences. It's the principle that our intentional actions create conditions that influence future experiences. Actions motivated by greed, hatred, and delusion tend to create suffering. Actions motivated by generosity, love, and wisdom tend to create happiness. This is not a cosmic system of reward and punishment, but simply how things work. When you act with greed, you reinforce the habit of greed in your mind, making future greed more likely. When you act with generosity, you reinforce generosity, making future generosity more natural. You're conditioning your own mind through your choices. This understanding is empowering. You're not a helpless victim of fate. You're participating in creating your experience through your intentions and actions. Every moment offers an opportunity to choose skillfully, to condition your mind toward peace rather than toward suffering. Tonight, you're creating karma with your intentions and actions. The intention to cultivate peace, to practice letting go, to prepare for restorative sleep. This intention creates karma that will bear fruit. You might not see results immediately. You might not fall asleep within minutes of setting this intention, but you're planting seeds that will grow. You're conditioning your mind toward peace, making future peace more accessible. Think of practice like physical exercise. The first time you go to the gym, you don't emerge with a perfectly fit body, but you've started a process. You've sent a message to your body that fitness matters. If you return consistently, gradually your body changes. In the same way, each time you practice these teachings, each time you choose awareness over distraction, each time you meet difficulty with compassion rather than judgment, you're conditioning your mind. Gradually, sometimes imperceptibly, your mind changes. Peace becomes more natural, sleep comes more easily, suffering decreases. This is the fruit of practice ripening in its own time. The Buddha's teaching on dependent origination is considered one of his most profound insights. It describes how all phenomena arise in dependence on causes and conditions. Nothing exists independently on its own, without relationship to everything else. You exist only in relationship to air, water, food, other beings, the entire web of life. Your thoughts arise dependent on previous thoughts, on sensory input, on the state of your body and nervous system. Your emotions arise dependent on how you're interpreting events, on memories and associations, on countless factors. This teaching reveals that nothing is fixed or permanent or independent. Everything is process, relationship, constant arising and passing based on changing conditions. When you understand dependent origination, you see that you can influence your experience by working with causes and conditions. If you want peace, create the conditions for peace. If you want sleep, create the conditions for sleep. You're not powerless in the face of fixed circumstances. You're participating in a fluid process where conditions can be shifted, causes can be addressed, and different outcomes can arise. Tonight, you're creating conditions for peaceful sleep. By listening to these teachings, you're conditioning your mind toward Dharma and away from worry. By relaxing your body, you're creating physical conditions conducive to rest. By practicing mindfulness and letting go, you're creating mental conditions that allow sleep to arise. You're working skillfully with causes and conditions rather than passively waiting for sleep to happen. This active participation paradoxically involves letting go of trying to force an outcome. You're not controlling sleep, but creating conditions where sleep can happen naturally, the way a gardener doesn't make plants grow, but creates conditions where growth happens naturally. The gardener provides soil, water, sunlight, then steps back and lets nature do its work. In the same way, you create conditions through practice, then release the outcome, trusting in the natural process. The Buddha taught that the path to peace involves 3 essential trainings. These are training in virtue or ethical conduct, training in concentration or meditation, and training in wisdom. These 3 support each other. When your life is aligned with ethical principles, when you're not harming yourself or others, your mind is naturally more peaceful. This peace makes concentration easier, and with concentrated mind, wisdom can arise, clear seeing into the nature of reality. This wisdom then informs how you live, completing the circle. Tonight, you're engaging all 3 trainings. By choosing to cultivate peace rather than feeding anxiety or negativity, you're training in virtue. By resting your attention on breath or on these teachings, returning when the mind wanders, you're training in concentration. By seeing directly how letting go creates peace, how resistance creates suffering, how mind creates experience, you're training in wisdom. These 3 trainings work together to transform your consciousness gradually but profoundly. In the city of Rajagriha, there lived a wealthy merchant named Anathapindika, who became one of the Buddha's most generous supporters. When he first heard the Buddha teach, he was so moved that he wanted to create a place where the Buddha and his monks could stay during the rainy season. He found a beautiful grove of trees owned by Prince Jeta. When Anathapindika asked to buy the grove, the prince, not really wanting to sell, named an absurdly high price. He said the merchant would have to cover the entire ground with gold coins. To the prince's amazement, Anathapindika agreed and began having cartloads of gold coins brought to the grove. The prince, seeing such extraordinary devotion and generosity, was moved. He said he would donate the trees while Anathapindika could purchase the land. Together, they created what became known as the Jetavana Monastery, where the Buddha spent many rainy seasons teaching. This story illustrates the profound generosity that naturally arises when someone recognizes real value. Anathapindika wasn't foolish with his money. He simply understood that the Buddha's teachings were worth more than any amount of gold, that supporting the spread of Dharma was the highest possible use of wealth. This story contains a teaching relevant to your practice tonight. What you give your attention to is what you're purchasing with the gold of your consciousness. Attention is your most valuable resource, more precious than money or time. When you give attention to worry, you're purchasing more worry. When you give attention to resentment, you're purchasing more resentment. But when you give attention to peace, to these teachings, to your breath, to the present moment, you're purchasing liberation. You're investing your consciousness wisely. Every moment that you return attention to something wholesome, every time you redirect from anxiety to awareness, you're being like Anathapindika, recognizing true value and generously supporting it. Your attention is the currency with which you build the monastery of your mind. Where you place attention consistently is what will flourish in your consciousness. Tonight, you're choosing to place attention on teachings and practices that lead to peace. This is the wisest investment you can make. The Buddha taught that there are 10 fetters, 10 chains that bind beings to suffering. These are the delusion of separate self, doubt about the teachings, attachment to rites and rituals, sensual desire, ill will, desire for existence in form realms, desire for formless existence, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. These might sound abstract, but they describe patterns that everyone experiences. The belief that you're a separate, independent self creates suffering because it's a misunderstanding of reality. Doubt keeps you from committing fully to practice. Attachment to external forms rather than internal realization prevents genuine understanding. These 10 fetters are progressively weakened and eliminated as you advance through the stages of awakening. The first three are broken at stream entry, when you have irreversible insight. The next two are weakened at the second stage and eliminated at the third. The final five are eliminated only at full enlightenment. Understanding these fetters helps you recognize what might be blocking your peace. Tonight, notice if any of these fetters are present. Perhaps there's doubt about whether these teachings will really help, whether you're capable of peace, whether sleep will come. This doubt is one of the fetters. You don't need to fight it or feel bad about it. Simply recognize it. There is doubt. Then gently return to practice, continuing despite the doubt, which gradually weakens its power. Maybe there's restlessness, the mind jumping from thought to thought, unable to settle. This is another fetter. Again, simply recognize it without judgment. Continue to gently return to your anchor in breath or in these teachings. Perhaps there's conceit, comparing yourself to some imaginary perfect practitioner and finding yourself lacking. This comparing mind is a form of conceit, whether you're judging yourself as better or worse than others. Recognize it, let it go, return to simple presence. Each time you recognize a fetter without being controlled by it, you weaken its hold. Liberation happens not through one dramatic breakthrough, but through the gradual weakening of these chains until they finally break. The Buddha spoke of three kinds of suffering. The first is the suffering of suffering, the obvious pain of illness, injury, loss, disappointment. This is what we normally think of as suffering, experiences that are clearly unpleasant. The second is the suffering of change. Even pleasant experiences involve suffering because they're impermanent. The pleasure will end, which creates a subtle anxiety even in the midst of enjoyment. The third and most subtle is the suffering of conditioned existence itself. Even neutral experiences, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, involve a subtle unsatisfactoriness because they're empty of permanent substance, because we're constantly having to construct and maintain our sense of self, because the process of existence is fundamentally exhausting. Understanding these three kinds of suffering helps us see that the Buddha wasn't just talking about obvious misery. He was pointing to a pervasive quality in all conditioned experience, a quality that can only be transcended through awakening to the unconditioned, to nirvana, to the peace beyond all suffering. Tonight, you might be experiencing any or all of these three kinds of suffering. Perhaps there's obvious discomfort, physical pain, or emotional distress. Perhaps there's the suffering of change, remembering pleasant moments from earlier and wishing they had continued, or anticipating tomorrow with anxiety about what might change. Perhaps there's the subtle suffering of simply being, of having to maintain yourself, of the relentless process of existing as a separate self. The Buddha's teaching offers relief from all three kinds. The first kind of suffering is eased through compassion, meeting pain with gentleness rather than resistance. The second kind is eased through understanding impermanence and releasing attachment. The third kind is eased through awakening to your true nature, recognizing that you are not actually a separate self, but the infinite awareness in which all experience arises. These teachings work at different levels to address suffering at its root, not just to provide temporary relief, but to point toward complete liberation. There is a story about a woman named Pattakara who lived during the Buddha's time. She experienced unimaginable tragedy, losing her entire family, her husband, her 2 children, her parents, and brother, all in a short period. She went mad with grief, wandering the streets half naked, unable to accept what had happened. Someone directed her to the Buddha. When she arrived at his teaching, still in her deranged state, some monks tried to keep her away, thinking she would disturb the gathering. But the Buddha said to let her come. He spoke to her with such compassion and wisdom that her mind began to clear. He taught her about impermanence, about how all conditioned things arise and pass away. He didn't minimize her loss or tell her to just get over it. He helped her understand her loss in the context of the universal truth of change and death. This understanding didn't erase her pain, but it transformed her relationship to it. She was able to accept what had happened, to grieve without going insane, to find meaning and purpose again. She eventually became a nun and was known for her wisdom in teaching other women who had experienced loss. This story reminds us that the Buddha's teachings are not abstract philosophy, but practical tools for working with real suffering. Pattakara's story is extreme, but everyone faces loss, everyone experiences grief, everyone must learn to continue living after unbearable things happen. The Buddha offers a path through suffering, not around it. He doesn't promise to prevent pain, but to show how pain can be met with wisdom and transformed. Tonight, if you're carrying grief or loss, if you're struggling with difficult circumstances, the Buddha's teachings can hold you. They can help you understand your suffering in a larger context. They can show you that what you're experiencing is part of the human condition, not a personal failing or punishment. They can teach you how to be with difficulty without being destroyed by it, how to remain open-hearted even when your heart is breaking. The Buddha taught that there are 4 bases of spiritual power. These are intention, energy, consciousness, and investigation. When these 4 are developed, they create the conditions for rapid progress on the spiritual path. Intention means knowing clearly what you're practicing for, having a strong motivation and clear direction. Energy means applying consistent effort, not being lazy or half-hearted. Consciousness means maintaining awareness, being present rather than getting lost in distraction. Investigation means examining your experience carefully, learning from it, seeing what works and what doesn't. When all 4 bases are strong, they work together like 4 legs of a table, creating a stable foundation for practice. Tonight, check these 4 bases. Is your intention clear? Are you truly committed to cultivating peace and preparing for restorative sleep? Is there sufficient energy, or have you slipped into dullness? Are you maintaining consciousness, staying aware, or drifting into distraction? Are you investigating, noticing what happens when you let go versus when you grasp, learning from your direct experience? Strengthening these 4 bases doesn't mean straining or forcing. It means bringing more clarity and commitment to what you're already doing. You strengthen intention by reminding yourself why this practice matters, what you hope to receive from it, how it serves your deepest values. You strengthen energy by bringing a quality of interest and curiosity to your experience, rather than going through motions mechanically. You strengthen consciousness by continually returning to present moment awareness when you notice you've drifted. You strengthen investigation by paying attention to cause and effect in your own mind, seeing clearly what leads to peace and what creates agitation. These 4 bases work together naturally when you engage fully with practice rather than practicing half-heartedly. They're not 4 separate things you have to develop, but 4 aspects of wholehearted engagement. The Buddha often taught about the middle way, the path between extremes. This wasn't just about avoiding extreme asceticism versus extreme indulgence. It's a principle that applies to all areas of practice and life. In meditation, the middle way means not too tight and not too loose, like tuning a stringed instrument. If the string is too tight, it will break. If it's too loose, it won't make sound. Just right. In the middle, it produces beautiful music. In working with your mind, the middle way means not suppressing thoughts through force, but also not being carried away by them, not straining to concentrate, but also not spacing out, not forcing your body to be rigid and still, but also not collapsing in sloppy posture. This principle of balance, of finding the middle way between extremes, is essential for sustainable practice and for a life well lived. Tonight, as you practice, notice if you're leaning toward either extreme. Are you trying too hard, straining to make sleep happen, forcing yourself to relax? This is one extreme that creates tension. Or are you giving up, not really practicing, just lying there lost in thought? This is the other extreme that leads nowhere. The middle way is engaged but relaxed, making effort but without strain, paying attention but not rigidly, allowing but not spacing out. This balance is subtle and might take time to find. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Simply notice when you've gone too far in one direction and gently return to center. Like the Buddha adjusting between extreme asceticism and extreme indulgence, like a musician tuning an instrument, you're finding the middle way that allows your practice to flourish. The Buddha taught about what Buddhists call the 3 marks of existence. These are impermanence, suffering, or unsatisfactoriness, and not self. We've explored each of these already, but together they form a comprehensive understanding of the conditioned realm. Everything changes, nothing provides lasting satisfaction, and there's no unchanging self at the center of experience. When you see these 3 marks clearly in your own experience, not just as ideas but as lived reality, something shifts fundamentally. You stop looking to changing phenomena for permanent satisfaction. You stop trying to build a solid identity from flowing experiences. You stop fighting against the nature of things and instead align with reality as it actually is. This shift is liberation, not escaping from the world, but seeing it clearly and therefore not being trapped by misunderstanding. Tonight, you can contemplate these 3 marks directly. Notice how your experience is constantly changing. The breath changes, sensations change, thoughts come and go. Even sounds arise and pass away. Everything is a flowing river. Nothing stands still. Notice how nothing is completely satisfactory. Even lying comfortably, there might be a slight discomfort somewhere, a thought that disturbs peace, a sensation that's not quite right. This isn't pessimism, but clear seeing. The conditioned realm simply cannot provide perfect, permanent satisfaction. Notice how there's no solid self at the center of experience. There's awareness, there are experiences arising in awareness, but where is the solid self you normally assume is having these experiences? When you look directly, you find process, flow, awareness, but no solid, separate entity. These contemplations are not meant to depress you, but to liberate you from chasing what cannot be caught, from building on foundation that cannot hold. They point you toward what is actually reliable, the unconditioned awareness that you truly are. The Buddha described nirvana, the goal of practice, in both positive and negative terms. Negatively, he described it as the ending of greed, hatred, and delusion, the cessation of suffering, the extinction of craving. Positively, he described it as peace, freedom, security, the highest happiness. Both descriptions point to the same reality from different angles. Nirvana is not annihilation or extinction of being. It's the extinction of suffering, the ending of the confused, grasping, resisting mind that creates suffering. What remains when suffering ends is not nothing, but the most profound peace, a happiness not dependent on conditions, a freedom beyond all limitation. The Buddha hesitated to describe nirvana in positive terms because people naturally grasp at descriptions, turning them into objects of desire and fantasy. Nirvana is not an object or a place or a state you can imagine. It's the ending of the entire process of grasping, the realization of what has always been true beneath the overlay of delusion. Tonight, you're practicing letting go, which is the movement toward nirvana. Every release, every letting go of grasping and resistance, every moment of allowing things to be as they are, moves you in the direction of the ultimate letting go that is liberation. You don't need to understand nirvana conceptually. You don't need to achieve some dramatic breakthrough tonight. You simply practice release, over and over, letting go of whatever you notice yourself clinging to. This gradual practice of release accumulates, conditions your mind toward letting go rather than grasping, and eventually leads to the final release that is awakening. Think of it like gradually opening your hand. You've been clenching your fist around your experience, trying to control it, hold it, make it be what you want. Gradually, you're learning to open that fist, to release the grasping. Eventually, the hand opens completely and remains open naturally. This is liberation, not as a dramatic event, but as the natural result of patient practice. The Buddha taught his disciples to contemplate death regularly, not to be morbid, but to stay aware of life's preciousness. He would have them reflect, I am of the nature to grow old. I cannot escape aging. I am of the nature to become ill. I cannot escape illness. I am of the nature to die. I cannot escape death. Everything I love and everyone I care about will change, and I will be separated from them. I inherit the results of my actions. Karma is my only true belonging. These reflections might sound depressing, but their purpose is to wake us up, to help us not waste the precious time we have, to motivate us to practice now rather than putting it off, to help us let go of petty concerns and focus on what truly matters. When you remember that you will die, that everyone you love will die, that everything is temporary and precious, it changes how you live. You're more present, more grateful, more loving, less caught up in meaningless drama, more committed to what has genuine value. Tonight, you might reflect that you're preparing for sleep, which is like a small death, a daily practice in letting go, in surrendering control, in trusting in a process larger than your small self. When you can surrender into sleep peacefully, you're developing the capacity to eventually surrender into death peacefully. This isn't meant to frighten you, but to help you see sleep as sacred practice. Every night is an opportunity to practice the ultimate letting go. Every morning when you wake is a rebirth, a new beginning, a fresh start. The Buddha taught that understanding death doesn't lead to despair, but to a deep appreciation for life, to presence, to the motivation to use this precious human existence wisely. As you release into sleep tonight, you're participating in one of life's great mysteries, the rhythm of consciousness releasing and returning, dying and being reborn, letting go and beginning again. There is a teaching in Buddhism about the hungry ghost, one of the 6 realms of existence in traditional cosmology. Hungry ghosts are depicted as beings with enormous bellies and tiny throats. They're always hungry but can never be satisfied because whatever they try to eat cannot pass through their tiny throats. This is not just about literal beings in another realm, but about a state of consciousness we can experience in this life. When you're in a hungry ghost state, you're always wanting, always seeking the next thing that will finally satisfy you, but nothing does. You consume and consume, but remain empty because you're trying to fill an internal lack with external things. The Buddha taught that this hungry ghost consciousness is caused by craving, by the delusion that happiness comes from getting what you want rather than from liberation from wanting itself. The way out of the hungry ghost realm is not to finally find the right thing to consume, but to understand that satisfaction comes from letting go of craving, not from satisfying it. Tonight, notice if hungry ghost consciousness is present. Perhaps there's a craving for sleep that makes you grasp at it desperately, which paradoxically prevents it from coming. Maybe there's a wanting for experience to be different than it is, for your body to feel better, for your mind to be quieter, for conditions to be more perfect. This wanting itself is what disturbs peace. The alternative is not to somehow stop wanting, which would just be another form of wanting. The alternative is to see clearly that wanting creates suffering, to understand that peace is not found in getting what you want, but in not being driven by wanting. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop having preferences. It means you're no longer enslaved by desire, no longer a hungry ghost endlessly consuming but never satisfied. You find satisfaction in what is, in this moment as it already is, which paradoxically opens the door for positive change to occur naturally. The Buddha taught that the path has gradual training, gradual progress, gradual penetration. It's not a sudden leap from ignorance to enlightenment, but a step-by-step journey of development and understanding. This is encouraging because it means that every small step matters. Every moment of practice counts. Nothing is wasted. The Buddha compared it to the ocean, which deepens gradually, slope after slope, with no sudden precipice, or like training a wild colt, which happens slowly through patient consistency. This gradual nature of the path means you don't need to become perfect overnight. You don't need to immediately master every practice or understand every teaching. You simply need to take the next step, practice as well as you can with your current understanding, and trust that the path reveals itself step by step, that today's practice prepares you for tomorrow's insight, that everything is unfolding in its own perfect timing. Tonight, you're taking one more step on this gradual path. Maybe it's a small step. Maybe your mind is busy and sleep feels far away. That's okay. You're still practicing, still learning, still conditioning your mind toward peace. Maybe it's a bigger step. Maybe something is clicking, understanding is dawning, peace is palpable. That's wonderful. Either way, you're on the path, you're walking in the direction of liberation, and that's what matters. The Buddha compared practitioners to 4 kinds of horses. The excellent horse runs at just the shadow of the whip. The good horse runs when the whip touches its hair. The mediocre horse runs when the whip touches its skin. The poor horse doesn't run until the whip touches its bone. But the Buddha said all 4 horses can reach the destination. Speed doesn't matter. What matters is continuing, not giving up, trusting the gradual process. Even the slowest horse reaches the goal if it keeps walking. In the ancient city of Savatthi, there lived a man named Bahia who had been practicing extreme austerities for many years. He wore bark as clothing and was revered by many as an enlightened master. But one day, a deity who had been his relative in a past life appeared to him and told him the truth. You are not yet enlightened, Bahia, but there is an enlightened one, the Buddha, teaching in Savatthi. Go to him if you truly seek liberation. Bahia was shocked but also humbled. He travelled immediately to find the Buddha. When he arrived in Savatthi, he learned that the Buddha was on alms round, walking through the city collecting food. Bahia rushed to find him, and when he did, threw himself at the Buddha's feet begging for teaching. The Buddha initially declined, saying this was not the proper time or place, as he was in the middle of his alms round. But Bahia was desperate. He said, "Lord, you or I could die at any moment. Please, teach me now." Moved by this recognition of impermanence and urgent sincerity, the Buddha gave him the most direct teaching. When seeing, there is just seeing. When hearing, just hearing. When sensing, just sensing. When cognizing, just cognizing. When there is this, there is no you in relation to that. And when there is no you in relation to that, there is no you located there. And when there is no you located there, you are neither here nor beyond nor between the two. This is the end of suffering. Upon hearing these words, Bahia was immediately enlightened. He understood completely the teaching that in direct experience, before thought creates a separate self and other, there is simply experiencing without experiencer, awareness without someone who is aware. This direct seeing liberated him instantly. Tragically, shortly after this enlightenment, Bahia was killed by a charging cow. The Buddha had his body cremated with full honors and declared that Bahia had been one of the quickest to understand the Dharma. This story illustrates that enlightenment is not about accumulating knowledge or practicing for decades. It's about a direct shift in perception, seeing through the illusion of a separate self, recognizing the nature of experience directly. The Buddha's teaching to Bahia was perfectly calibrated to his readiness. After years of sincere practice, even though misdirected, Bahia was ripe for awakening. The Buddha's words pointed directly to what Bahia needed to see. Tonight, you can practice what the Buddha taught Bahia. In this moment, there is hearing these words, but is there really a you who is hearing? Or is there simply the experience of hearing happening? There is sensation in the body, but is there a you who has the sensation? Or is there simply sensation arising in awareness? When you look closely, you find experience, but the experiencer is curiously absent. There are thoughts, but no solid thinker. There are sensations, but no solid feeler. There is awareness, but no one who is aware. This is not a philosophical position, but something you can verify directly in your own experience. The sense of being a separate self is constructed each moment through thought, but in the gaps between thoughts, in the direct experience before thought labels and claims it, what is actually here? Just this, just experiencing, just awareness. This recognition is deeply freeing and deeply peaceful. You don't have to maintain a self, protect it, defend it, promote it. You can simply be the awareness in which all experience arises, resting in your true nature, which is spacious, peaceful, and free. The Buddha taught that there are 5 hindrances to meditation and peace. These are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. We've touched on these before, but they're worth exploring more deeply because they're the most common obstacles you'll encounter, not just meditation, but in trying to sleep. Sensual desire is the mind that reaches outward toward pleasant experiences, that replays enjoyable memories or fantasizes about future pleasures. It seems innocent, but it keeps the mind activated and prevents the internalization necessary for sleep. Ill will is the mind of aversion that replays conflicts, rehearses arguments, dwells on resentments. This is obviously agitating and incompatible with rest. Sloth and torpor is dullness, fogginess, lack of clarity. During the day, this is an obstacle, but at night it might seem helpful for sleep. But actually, sloth and torpor is not the same as healthy sleep. It's a depressed, heavy state different from genuine rest. Restlessness and worry is the racing mind, jumping from thought to thought, catastrophizing about the future, unable to settle. This is perhaps the most common hindrance to sleep in modern life. Finally, doubt is the questioning mind that undermines practice. Will this work? Am I doing it right? Maybe I should try something else. This doubt prevents the commitment and consistency necessary for practice to take effect. The Buddha taught specific antidotes for each hindrance. For sensual desire, contemplate impermanence, remembering that all pleasant experiences are temporary and cannot provide lasting satisfaction. For ill will, cultivate loving kindness, meeting aversion with its opposite. For sloth and torpor, arouse energy through inspiration or by bringing more investigation and interest to your experience. For restlessness, cultivate calm by anchoring attention in something stable like breath. For doubt, reflect on the teachings. Remember times when practice has helped. Connect with faith and confidence. Tonight, if you notice any of these hindrances present, you can work skillfully with them using these antidotes. But you can also work with all 5 hindrances simultaneously using a single approach. Simply recognize them clearly. When you see a hindrance with clear awareness, naming it precisely, its power diminishes. You're no longer caught in it, identified with it. You're the awareness that observes it, which is already free from it. There is a teaching in Buddhism about the three kinds of wisdom. The first is wisdom gained through learning, hearing, or reading teachings. The second is wisdom gained through reflection, thinking deeply about what you've learned, examining it from different angles, contemplating its implications. The third and highest wisdom is wisdom gained through direct experience, through practice, through seeing truth directly in your own consciousness. All three kinds of wisdom are valuable and support each other, but the third kind is what actually transforms. You can know intellectually that letting go brings peace, but until you've directly experienced it many times, until your body and heart know it as truth, it won't change your life. Tonight, you're developing all three kinds of wisdom. You're hearing teachings which plant seeds. You're reflecting on them as you listen, which helps them take root. And you're practicing directly experiencing what happens when you let go, when you bring awareness to breath, when you meet difficulty with compassion. This direct experience is building the kind of wisdom that will transform your relationship with sleep, with stress, with suffering itself. The Buddha often emphasized that his teaching was thoroughly practical, aimed at ending suffering rather than satisfying intellectual curiosity. He compared his teaching to a handful of leaves picked up from the forest floor. Holding them up, he asked his disciples, "Which are more numerous, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the entire forest?" Obviously, the forest contains vastly more leaves. The Buddha explained, "What I know is like all the leaves in the forest. What I teach is like the leaves in my hand. And why do I teach only this small amount? Because only this is useful for liberation from suffering. Everything else, however interesting, doesn't lead directly to the goal." This teaching reminds us not to get lost in speculation, not to worry about questions that don't directly serve liberation. The practical question is always, does this lead to less suffering and more peace? If yes, practice it. If no, let it go. Tonight, the practical question is, does this practice, right here and now, lead you toward peace and rest? If yes, continue. If something isn't working, adjust. Don't get caught up in wondering whether you're doing everything perfectly or understanding every concept completely. Simply notice, am I more peaceful than when I started? Is my body more relaxed? Is my mind more settled? If yes, you're on the right track. The proof is in direct experience, not in intellectual understanding. The Buddha would say, "I teach only suffering and the end of suffering." Everything he offered was in service of this practical goal. Your practice tonight has the same practical goal. Not to become a better Buddhist, not to understand complex philosophy, but simply to release suffering and discover peace. Keep returning to this simple, practical intention. The Buddha taught what is called the divine abode of compassion. This is karuna, the quality of heart that naturally responds to suffering with the wish to help, to alleviate, to bring relief. Compassion is not pity, which creates separation and superiority. Compassion recognizes shared vulnerability, understanding that all beings suffer, that we're all struggling with various forms of difficulty, that we're all deserving of care and kindness. The Buddha taught that we should cultivate compassion for all beings without exception, including ourselves. In fact, he taught that if you search throughout the entire world, you will not find anyone more deserving of your love and compassion than yourself. This is not selfishness, but wisdom, recognizing that you too are a being who experiences suffering, who is doing your best to navigate life's challenges, who deserves kindness rather than harsh judgment. Tonight, practice directing compassion toward yourself. Notice any suffering present, physical discomfort, emotional difficulty, mental stress. Instead of judging yourself for this suffering or trying to immediately fix it, simply acknowledge it with compassion. This is hard, I'm struggling right now, and in this moment I hold myself with kindness. You might place your hand on your heart or belly, a physical gesture of self-compassion. You might say silently, "May I be free from this suffering, may I be at peace, may I be kind to myself." This is not self-pity or self-indulgence. This is recognizing your own humanity, your own vulnerability, and responding with the same kindness you would naturally offer to someone else who was suffering. This self-compassion is profoundly healing. When you stop being at war with yourself, when you stop judging and criticizing and demanding impossible perfection, your nervous system can finally relax. Peace becomes possible because you've stopped creating internal conflict. The Buddha taught about the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is unavoidable, part of having a body and a heart that can be hurt. Suffering is optional, created by our resistance to pain, our stories about pain, our belief that we shouldn't be experiencing what we're experiencing. The famous equation is pain times resistance equals suffering. When you can meet pain with acceptance rather than resistance, suffering decreases even if pain remains. This doesn't mean you become passive or don't take appropriate action to address pain. It means you stop adding the second layer of suffering that comes from fighting against reality. Tonight, if there's any physical or emotional pain present, practice this teaching. Feel the actual sensations without the story about how terrible they are or how they shouldn't be there. Meet them with gentle awareness, even with compassion, rather than with resistance. Notice how this changes your relationship with the pain. It might not disappear, but it becomes more bearable, less overwhelming, more workable. There's a story about Angulimala, a serial killer who had murdered 99 people and wore their fingers on a necklace around his neck, which is what his name means. He was pursuing his 100th victim when the Buddha crossed his path. Angulimala tried to catch the Buddha, but no matter how fast he ran, he couldn't reach the Buddha, who appeared to be walking at a normal pace. Finally, exhausted, Angulimala shouted, "Stop, monk!" The Buddha replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." This stopped Angulimala in his tracks. He asked what the Buddha meant. The Buddha explained, "I have stopped causing harm to living beings. I have stopped violence. I have stopped the endless cycle of suffering. You have not yet stopped." Angulimala, a man who had committed terrible evil, was so moved by this teaching that he immediately asked to become a monk. The Buddha accepted him, to the shock of many, and Angulimala became a devoted practitioner who eventually attained enlightenment. This story teaches that no one is beyond redemption, that the potential for awakening exists in all beings regardless of past actions. It also teaches about the power of truly stopping, of ceasing the habitual patterns that create suffering. Tonight, you too are practicing stopping the forward momentum of activity, stopping the endless mental chatter, stopping the striving and grasping and pushing. Like the Buddha saying, "I have stopped," you're learning to come to rest, to cease the internal motion that prevents peace. This stopping is not shutting down or suppressing. It's a conscious choice to pause, to interrupt habitual patterns, to create space where peace can arise. Each time you return attention to breath, you're stopping the forward momentum of thought. Each time you let go of a worry, you're stopping the cycle of anxiety. Each time you choose presence over distraction, you're stopping, coming to rest in what is. The Buddha taught about the nature of thought, comparing thoughts to visitors at a guest house. In the Sufi poet Rumi's version of this teaching, made famous through Rumi's beautiful poem, he describes welcoming all visitors, even the difficult ones, because each has been sent as a guide. The Buddhist version is similar. Thoughts arise like visitors knocking at your door. You don't have to invite them all in for tea. You can acknowledge them at the door, see clearly what kind of visitor this is, and decide whether to engage. Some thoughts are helpful, visitors bringing useful information or wise perspective. Others are troublesome visitors bringing worry, fear, resentment, or confusion. The skill is recognizing which is which and responding appropriately. You don't have to believe every thought or follow every thought where it wants to lead you. You can be the aware host who remains in your own house while various visitors come and go at the door. Tonight, practice this relationship with thoughts. When a thought arises, don't automatically follow it into its story. Simply note, there's a thought about tomorrow's meeting. There's a thought about that conversation earlier. There's a thought judging this practice. See the thought clearly, acknowledge it, and let it go without following it. You remain as the aware space in which thoughts arise, not as the thoughts themselves. This subtle shift in identity is profound. When you're the space rather than the content, when you're the host rather than the visitor, you're no longer at the mercy of whatever thoughts happen to arise. You remain free, peaceful, unshakable, like the sky that's not disturbed by whatever clouds pass through. This is the mind of the Buddha, spacious awareness that remains peaceful regardless of what arises within it. The Buddha taught that the path he discovered is ancient, not something he invented, but something he rediscovered. He compared it to finding an ancient city in the forest, a city that had been abandoned and forgotten but whose ruins remain, showing the way people lived long ago. The path to liberation, the Buddha taught, has always existed, has always been true, has always been available. He simply rediscovered it and showed others the way. This is comforting because it means you're not trying to create something new. or become something other than what you are. You're discovering what has always been true, remembering what you've temporarily forgotten, awakening to your original nature that has never actually been lost. The peace you seek has always been present, just obscured by the clouds of confusion, grasping, and resistance. As these clouds clear through practice, your natural peace shines forth. In the Zen tradition that grew from the Buddha's teachings, there's a saying, "Your original face before your parents were born." This points to the essential nature that exists beyond your personal history, beyond your conditioning, beyond even this lifetime. What were you before you were born? What will you be after you die? These questions point towards something that transcends the personal self, something vast and timeless and free. You might not be able to answer these questions conceptually, but you can taste this timeless nature directly. In the gap between thoughts, in the space of pure awareness before thought creates a story about what you're experiencing. In the simple presence to this moment without past or future, you touch your original face. You meet what you truly are beyond all the layers of identity and story and conditioning. Tonight, in the silence between these words, in the space between breaths, in the stillness underlying all movement, your original nature is present and available. You don't have to go anywhere or become anything to access it. You simply have to stop looking outward and rest in the awareness that's already here, that's reading these words, that's hearing sounds, that's aware of sensations. This awareness is what you are, not the changing contents of awareness, but the awareness itself. When you rest as this awareness, you're resting as your original face, as the Buddha nature that has always been and will always be, that was never born and will never die. This recognition brings the deepest peace because you realize you're not this small, vulnerable, temporary self you thought you were. You're the vast, indestructible, eternal awareness in which all small selves arise and dissolve like waves on an infinite ocean. The Buddha spoke about what he called the three trainings: training in virtue, training in concentration, and training in wisdom. These three work together in a spiral of development. When you live ethically, not harming yourself or others, your mind is naturally more peaceful. This peace makes concentration easier. With concentrated mind, you can see clearly into the nature of reality, developing wisdom. This wisdom then informs how you live, deepening virtue. Round and round the spiral goes, each element supporting the others, gradually purifying consciousness and leading toward awakening. Tonight, you're engaging all three trainings. You're training in virtue by choosing wholesome mental states over unwholesome ones, peace over anxiety, compassion over judgment. You're training in concentration by returning attention again and again to breath or to these teachings. You're training in wisdom by observing directly how mind creates experience, how letting go brings peace, how resistance creates suffering. The Buddha taught that ethical conduct is the foundation of the path. Without it, concentration and wisdom cannot develop fully. What does ethical conduct mean in the context of sleep practice? It means not harming yourself with harsh judgment, not believing the cruel things your mind might say about your worthlessness or inadequacy. It means being truthful with yourself about what you're experiencing rather than pretending everything is fine when you're actually struggling. It means not taking what's not yours, not stealing peace from tomorrow by staying up unnecessarily tonight, not stealing presence from this moment by getting lost in past or future. It means not engaging in sexual misconduct, which in a broader sense means not using others or yourself for selfish gratification, bringing integrity to all relationships, including the relationship with yourself. It means not using intoxicants that cloud awareness, which extends to not intoxicating yourself with endless distraction and entertainment when what you really need is rest. These ethical principles, when lived, create the foundation for peace to arise naturally. There's a teaching in Buddhism about the three poisons and their opposites. Greed's opposite is generosity. Hatred's opposite is loving kindness. Delusion's opposite is wisdom. But there's also a teaching about what happens when these opposites are perfected, when they mature fully. Perfected generosity becomes renunciation, the ability to let go completely, to not grasp at anything. Perfected loving-kindness becomes compassion, actively responding to suffering rather than just feeling warm feelings. Perfected wisdom becomes liberation itself, the direct realization of truth that frees consciousness from all bondage. Tonight, you're practicing these perfected qualities. Renunciation means letting go of everything, releasing all the day's experiences, surrendering all effort, renouncing even the identity of being someone who is trying to sleep. Compassion means meeting any difficulty with tenderness rather than judgment. Liberation means recognizing your true nature as spacious awareness, free from the beginning, never actually trapped despite appearances. These aren't distant goals but present possibilities, available in any moment you choose to embody them. The Buddha taught about right effort, one of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right effort has 4 aspects. First, prevent unwholesome states that haven't yet arisen. Second, abandon unwholesome states that have arisen. Third, cultivate wholesome states that haven't yet arisen. Fourth, maintain and strengthen wholesome states that have arisen. This might sound like a lot of work, but it's actually describing a natural process of being mindful of your mental states and gently guiding them toward what's beneficial. Tonight, you can practice all 4 aspects. If you notice your mind starting to move toward worry, you can gently redirect before worry fully arises, preventing the unwholesome state. If worry is already present, you can choose to let it go rather than feeding it, abandoning the unwholesome state. If peace hasn't yet arisen, you can cultivate it through conscious relaxation and letting go. If peace is present, you can dwell in it, savoring it, allowing it to deepen, maintaining the wholesome state. This is right effort, not straining but wisely working with your mind, gently guiding it toward peace. There's a beautiful teaching about the Buddha's first discourse after his enlightenment. He set forth the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These 8 factors are not sequential steps, but aspects of a unified way of being. They all support and interpenetrate each other. Right view means seeing clearly into the nature of reality, understanding the 4 noble truths. Right intention means aligning your motivations with liberation rather than with greed, hatred, or delusion. Right speech means speaking truthfully, kindly, and beneficially. Right action means acting in ways that don't harm yourself or others. Right livelihood means earning your living through ethical means that don't cause suffering. Right effort we've just discussed. Right mindfulness means maintaining clear awareness of present experience. Right concentration means developing the focused, stable mind that can see deeply into truth. Tonight, you can reflect on how this eightfold path applies to sleep practice. Right view means understanding that peace comes from letting go rather than from getting conditions perfect. Right intention means truly wanting peace rather than just wanting to escape discomfort. Right speech includes how you speak to yourself internally with kindness rather than criticism. Right action includes the physical practices of relaxation, proper sleep hygiene, taking care of your body. Right livelihood in the broadest sense means living in a way that supports your well-being rather than undermines it. Right effort means working with your mind skillfully, as we discussed. Right mindfulness means staying present rather than getting lost in thought. Right concentration means keeping attention steadily on breath or these teachings rather than being scattered. All 8 factors are woven together in your practice right now, supporting you on the path toward peace. The Buddha taught about the difference between concentration and mindfulness, though they work together. Concentration is the ability to focus attention on a single object, to keep the mind from wandering, to develop stability and depth. Mindfulness is the clear awareness that knows what is happening as it happens, that observes experience without judgment or reactivity. Both are essential. Concentration provides the stability and focus that allows you to stay present. Mindfulness provides the clear seeing that allows wisdom to arise. Some practices emphasize concentration, like focusing intensely on the breath or a mantra. Other practices emphasize mindfulness, like open awareness of whatever arises. The Buddha taught both, understanding that different approaches work for different people and different circumstances. Tonight, you're working with both. When you anchor attention in breath or in these teachings, you're developing concentration. When you notice what's happening, observing thoughts and sensations without getting caught in them, you're developing mindfulness. Both are guiding you toward the same goal, the peaceful, wise, awakened mind. There's a story about a time when the Buddha was dying. He was very old and had become ill. He knew death was approaching. His closest disciples were distraught, not knowing how they would continue without him. The Buddha's final teaching was simple but profound. Be a lamp unto yourselves. Take refuge in yourself and in the Dharma. Don't look for refuge in anyone else. All conditioned things are subject to decay. Work out your own liberation with diligence. These last words emphasize the Buddha's consistent teaching. You must walk the path yourself. You must discover truth through your own practice. You cannot rely on external authority forever. The Buddha could point the way, but each person must walk it. This is both challenging and empowering. You cannot rely on anyone else to give you peace, but you have within you everything necessary to find it. The Buddha's final message was one of confidence in each person's ability to awaken if they sincerely practice. Tonight, you are being a lamp unto yourself. You're not relying on these teachings to magically give you peace. You're using them as tools, as supports, as pointers, but you're doing the work yourself. You're letting go yourself. You're staying present yourself. You're meeting difficulty with compassion yourself. The peace you discover is your peace, earned through your practice, verified in your direct experience. This makes it real and lasting, not dependent on external conditions or authorities. You're discovering that you can find peace, that you have the capacity for wisdom and compassion, that liberation is not some distant goal but something you taste every time you let go, every time you stay present, every time you meet experience with clear awareness and an open heart. The Buddha taught about what Buddhists call the three jewels or three refuges. These are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Taking refuge in Buddha means recognizing the potential for awakening that exists in all beings, honoring the example of one who fully actualized this potential. Taking refuge in Dharma means trusting in the teachings, in the truth of the path, in the natural laws that govern reality. Taking refuge in Sangha means connecting with the community of practitioners, all those who have walked or are walking this path. These three refuges provide support and direction on the spiritual journey. When you're confused or struggling, you can remember the Buddha's example, reminding yourself that awakening is possible. You can return to the teachings, finding guidance in the Dharma. You can remember you're part of a larger community connected through practice to millions of seekers across time and space. Tonight, you're taking refuge in all three jewels. You're taking refuge in the Buddha by practicing as he taught, by following the path he discovered. You're taking refuge in Dharma by trusting these teachings about letting go, about mindfulness, about compassion. You're taking refuge in Sangha by joining the countless beings who have used these practices to find peace before sleep. You're not alone in this. You're supported by an ancient lineage, held by teachings that have proven their effectiveness over 2 millennia, connected to all who seek liberation from suffering. This sense of connection and support is itself soothing. You don't have to figure everything out by yourself. You're part of something larger, walking a well-worn path that leads reliably toward peace. The Buddha spoke often about the importance of spiritual friends, what's called Kalyana Mitra, or noble friendship. He taught that having good spiritual friends is not just part of the spiritual life, but the whole of it. When you surround yourself with people who value wisdom, compassion, and awakening, who support your practice rather than undermining it, who inspire you through their example, your own practice naturally flourishes. Conversely, if you spend time with people who reinforce unwholesome patterns, who encourage distraction and indulgence, who mock spiritual values, your practice will struggle. The Buddha advised choosing friends carefully, seeking those who will support your highest aspirations. This doesn't mean being judgmental or superior. It means recognizing that we're deeply influenced by the company we keep and choosing wisely. In a sense, these teachings are your spiritual friend tonight. They're supporting your intention to find peace, encouraging wholesome mental states, reminding you of what truly matters. The Buddha himself is your spiritual friend across the centuries, offering his wisdom and compassion through these teachings that have been preserved and passed down. All those who practice these teachings successfully are your spiritual friends, proving that the path works, that liberation is possible. As you rest here, feel the support of this invisible community, all those who have sought peace before you, all those who have found it through these practices. You're walking in their footsteps, supported by their example, encouraged by their success. This is the power of spiritual friendship, connecting you to something much larger than your individual struggle, reminding you that millions have walked this path successfully and you can too. The Buddha taught about the fetters that bind beings to suffering. We've mentioned these before, but one in particular is relevant tonight, uddhacca, which means restlessness or agitation. This is the quality of mind that cannot settle, that jumps from thought to thought, that feels anxious and activated. It's one of the most common obstacles to meditation and to sleep. The Buddha taught specific practices for working with restlessness. One is to focus on something that has a calming effect, like breath or a soothing image. Another is to relax the body consciously, recognizing that mental agitation is often accompanied by physical tension. A third is to contemplate peace itself, reflecting on how peaceful it feels when restlessness is absent. A fourth is to talk to someone wise about your restlessness, getting perspective on it. Tonight, you can work with restlessness using these methods. Focus on breath, allowing its natural rhythm to calm your nervous system. Relax your body consciously, softening each area of tension. Contemplate how peaceful you feel when mind is settled rather than agitated. And in a sense, you're talking to the Buddha himself through these teachings, receiving his wisdom about how to work with this challenge. Another fetter is vicikiccha, doubt or uncertainty. This is not healthy questioning or investigation, but undermining doubt that prevents commitment and consistent practice. Doubt whispers, "This probably won't work. Maybe I should try something else. I'm probably not capable of this." The antidote to doubt is faith or confidence, saddha in Pali. This is not blind faith, but confidence based on reason and experience. You develop confidence by remembering times when practice has helped, by reflecting on the Buddha's enlightenment and the success of countless practitioners, by testing the teachings and seeing they actually work. You also develop confidence by connecting with inspiration, reading about awakened beings, spending time with practitioners who embody the qualities you're cultivating. Tonight, if doubt arises, you can work with it by remembering any moment when you've experienced peace through letting go. Even one clear experience is proof that the path works. You can reflect on the Buddha's awakening, reminding yourself that if he could find complete liberation from suffering, surely you can find enough peace to sleep tonight. You can test the teaching directly. Does letting go of this worry right now bring some relief? If yes, your confidence grows. The Buddha taught that the path requires 3 qualities: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. We've explored these as the 3 trainings, but he also taught that 3 other qualities are essential: faith, energy, and mindfulness. Faith or confidence gives you the trust to begin and continue practicing even when results aren't immediately apparent. Energy gives you the motivation and stamina to maintain practice consistently. Mindfulness gives you the clear awareness that allows you to see what's actually happening and learn from experience. These 3 qualities support each other. When faith is strong, energy naturally arises because you believe practice is worthwhile. When energy is present, mindfulness is easier because you're engaged rather than drifting. When mindfulness is clear, faith deepens because you see directly how the teachings work. Tonight, reflect on these 3 qualities in yourself. Do you have faith that peace is possible tonight? If not, can you open to the possibility even as a working hypothesis to test? Do you have energy for practice, or have you slipped into passive waiting for sleep to come? If energy is low, can you arouse some interest or curiosity about your experience? Is mindfulness present, or have you gotten lost in thought? If awareness has wandered, can you gently return to presence? The Buddha taught that there are 3 characteristics that mark all conditioned phenomena. We've explored these as the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, or unsatisfactoriness, and not self. Understanding these deeply leads to dispassion, to letting go of clinging, and ultimately to liberation. But the Buddha also taught about the unconditioned, that which is not subject to these 3 marks. The unconditioned is nirvana, the deathless, that which does not arise and does not pass away. This unconditioned reality is not separate from conditioned reality like another realm somewhere else. It's the nature of things when seen clearly, the peace that exists when the agitation of grasping and resisting ceases. The conditioned and unconditioned are like 2 ways of seeing the same reality, one obscured by delusion and one clear. When you see through delusion, the unconditioned reveals itself as having been present all along. Tonight, you're practicing touching the unconditioned. When you rest in awareness itself rather than in the changing contents of awareness, you touch something that doesn't arise and doesn't pass away. Awareness is always here, always now, unchanging, even while everything within it changes. When you let go of grasping and rest in simple being, you touch the peace that doesn't depend on conditions, that exists whether circumstances are pleasant or unpleasant. When you recognize your nature as spacious awareness rather than as a solid, separate self, you touch the deathless, that which was never born and will never die. These aren't philosophical concepts, but direct experiences available right now. In this moment, what is aware, what knows that you're hearing these words? This awareness itself is the unconditioned, the deathless, your true nature that has always been free. The Buddha taught a meditation practice called the 4 Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes. These are loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. We've explored these before, but they're worth practicing explicitly now. Loving kindness is the wish for beings to be happy. You can practice by silently repeating phrases like, "May I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be free from suffering," then extend the same wishes to others. May all beings be happy, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free from suffering. Compassion is the wish for beings to be free from suffering. When you encounter suffering in yourself or others, compassion naturally arises as the caring response. You can practice by acknowledging suffering and wishing for its alleviation. May this suffering ease. May I find peace. May all beings be free from pain. Sympathetic joy is the ability to delight in others' happiness without jealousy. Practice by thinking of someone who is happy and genuinely feeling glad for them, letting their joy increase your own. Equanimity is the spacious balance that remains steady regardless of circumstances, recognizing that all beings are subject to their own karma, their own choices and consequences. Practice by reflecting, all beings are responsible for their own actions. I cannot control others' experiences. May I meet whatever arises with peace and wisdom. These four qualities create a beautiful foundation for peace. When you dwell in loving kindness, the mind is naturally gentle and warm. When you embody compassion, the heart remains open rather than closed. When you cultivate sympathetic joy, you're not caught in comparison and competition. When you rest in equanimity, you're not thrown off balance by life's changes. Tonight, let these four divine abodes surround and permeate you. Feel loving kindness toward yourself and all beings. Touch compassion for your own struggles and the struggles of others. Allow joy to arise, both for your own practice and for all who are seeking peace tonight. Rest in equanimity, accepting this moment exactly as it is. These qualities transform your inner atmosphere, creating the perfect conditions for deep rest. The Buddha taught about different types of meditation. Samatha, or calm abiding practices, emphasize concentration, developing a peaceful, focused, stable mind. Vipassana, or insight practices, emphasize clear seeing, observing the arising and passing of phenomena to understand their nature. Both are valuable and support each other. Calm provides the stability that allows clear seeing. Clear seeing reveals truths that naturally lead to greater calm. Some traditions emphasize one approach over the other, but the Buddha taught both, recognizing their complementary aspects of a complete practice. Tonight, you're engaging both types of meditation. When you focus on breath or these teachings, developing concentration and calm, you're practicing samatha. When you observe your experience, noticing how thoughts arise and pass, how sensations change, how letting go brings peace, you're practicing vipassana. Both are working together to transform your consciousness and guide you towards sleep. There's a teaching about the 5 spiritual faculties: faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. These 5 need to be balanced. Too much faith without wisdom becomes blind belief. Too much wisdom without faith becomes dry intellectualism. Too much energy without concentration becomes agitation. Too much concentration without energy becomes dullness. Mindfulness balances all the others, observing what's needed in each moment. The art of practice is maintaining this balance, noticing when one faculty is too weak or too strong and adjusting accordingly. Tonight, check your balance. Is faith present but balanced with wisdom? Is energy present but not excessive? Is concentration developing without becoming rigid? Is wisdom arising from direct observation? Most importantly, is mindfulness present, allowing you to see clearly what's happening and respond appropriately? This balancing is subtle work, more art than science, learned gradually through practice and reflection. The Buddha taught about the 7 factors of enlightenment: mindfulness, investigation of phenomena, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. When these 7 are developed and balanced, they lead naturally to awakening. Mindfulness is clear awareness of present experience. Investigation is interested, curious examination of what you're experiencing. Energy is the motivation and effort to practice. Joy is the happiness that arises from wholesome states. Tranquility is the peace of body and mind. Concentration is the focused, stable attention. Equanimity is the balanced, spacious awareness that remains steady through changing conditions. These 7 factors work together, each supporting the others. When mindfulness is strong, you can investigate your experience clearly. This investigation generates energy and interest. Energy leads to joy. Joy naturally calms into tranquility. Tranquility supports concentration, and concentration deepens equanimity. Round and round they support each other, gradually transforming consciousness. Tonight, you can notice these 7 factors in your practice. Mindfulness is present when you're aware of breath, of body, of thoughts arising and passing. Investigation is present when you're interested in your experience, noticing what happens when you let go versus when you grasp. Energy is present when you're engaged rather than spacing out. Joy might arise when you notice some peace developing. Tranquility is the growing calm in body and mind. Concentration is present when attention remains steady on breath or teachings. Equanimity is present when you can allow whatever arises without being disturbed. These 7 factors are developing right now through your practice, gradually creating the conditions for deep peace and ultimately for awakening itself. You're not just preparing for sleep, you're walking the path to liberation. The Buddha taught about the 6 sense doors through which we experience the world: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. Yes, mind is considered a sense door, taking mental objects like thoughts and memories as its input, just as the eye takes visual objects. At each sense door, a process occurs. First, contact between sense organ, object, and consciousness. Then a feeling tone arises, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Then perception labels the experience. Then a response occurs, either grasping at pleasant experiences, pushing away unpleasant experiences, or ignoring neutral experiences. This process happens rapidly and usually unconsciously, but with mindfulness, you can observe this process as it occurs, creating space between stimulus and response. In that space lies freedom. You don't have to automatically grasp at what's pleasant or push away what's unpleasant. You can observe the arising of feeling and choose a more skillful response. Tonight, practice mindfulness at the sense doors. When hearing these words, notice the process. There's contact, sound meeting, ear meeting consciousness. There's a feeling tone, perhaps pleasant or neutral. There's perception, recognizing words and meaning, and there's your response. Can you observe this process without getting caught in automatic reaction? When sensation arises in the body, notice the same process: contact, feeling tone, perception, response. Can you feel sensation without immediately judging it as bad and trying to eliminate it? When thoughts arise, notice their mental objects appearing at the mind door: contact, feeling, perception, response. Can you observe thoughts without automatically following them or believing them? This mindfulness at the sense doors is profoundly freeing. It reveals that you're not at the mercy of experience. You can observe experience with clear awareness and respond wisely rather than reacting automatically. The Buddha taught about the difference between ordinary consciousness and awakened consciousness. Ordinary consciousness is characterized by identification, grasping, aversion, and delusion. We identify with experiences as me and mine. We grasp at what we like. We push away what we don't like. We don't see clearly how things actually are. Awakened consciousness is characterized by non-identification, non-grasping, non-aversion, and clear seeing. Experiences arise, but aren't taken personally. Pleasant and unpleasant experiences are met with equanimity. Things are seen as they actually are, impermanent, unsatisfying, and empty of inherent self. This shift from ordinary to awakened consciousness is what the path cultivates. It happens gradually through practice, moment by moment, each time you choose awareness over identification, letting go over grasping, acceptance over resistance, clear seeing over delusion. Tonight, notice which mode of consciousness is operating. When you're identified with thoughts and feelings, when you're grasping at pleasant experiences or pushing away unpleasant ones, ordinary consciousness is operating. When you're resting as the aware space in which experiences arise, when you're allowing whatever is present without grasping or resisting, when you're seeing clearly that all experiences are temporary and not who you are, awakened consciousness is present. You can consciously choose to shift from ordinary to awakened consciousness. This choice is the essence of practice. Each time you disidentify from a thought, each time you let go of grasping, each time you accept what is, each time you see clearly, you're choosing awakened consciousness. Over time, this becomes more natural, more your default mode, until one day you realize you're no longer operating from ordinary consciousness at all. You've shifted permanently into awakened awareness. This is the goal of the path, and you're working toward it right now with each moment of practice. The Buddha told a parable about a man who was shot with a poisoned arrow. A doctor came to remove it, but the man refused treatment until he knew who shot the arrow, what kind of bow was used, what the arrow was made of, what type of poison was applied, and many other details. The Buddha said this man would die before getting answers to all his questions. In the same way, those who refuse to practice until they understand every philosophical question about existence, consciousness, and reality will die without finding liberation. The Buddha taught only what is necessary for the ending of suffering, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and the practices that lead directly to awakening. Speculative questions that don't serve this practical goal were set aside as irrelevant. This teaching emphasizes the practical, results-oriented nature of the Buddha's approach. Tonight, apply this teaching by letting go of questions that don't serve your immediate goal of peace and rest. Questions like, why can't I sleep more easily? Or what if this doesn't work? Or am I doing this correctly? Are like asking about the arrow's origin while poison spreads. The practical question is simply, can I let go right now? Can I soften in this moment? Can I be present to this breath? These questions lead directly to peace. Everything else can wait until tomorrow. Don't let speculative thinking or self-judgment distract you from the simple, practical work of relaxing, breathing, and allowing sleep to come naturally. The Buddha's pragmatic approach cuts through endless mental complication and brings you back to what actually works. The Buddha taught about wholesome and unwholesome mental states, kusala and akusala in Pali. Wholesome states arise from non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. They include qualities like generosity, loving-kindness, compassion, joy, peace, wisdom, mindfulness, and concentration. Unwholesome states arise from greed, hatred, and delusion. They include qualities like selfishness, anger, cruelty, envy, worry, confusion, and distraction. The distinction between wholesome and unwholesome is not moralistic but based on results. Wholesome states lead to happiness, peace, and liberation. Unwholesome states lead to suffering, agitation, and bondage. The path is simply cultivating wholesome states and releasing unwholesome ones. This is how you gradually purify consciousness and create the conditions for awakening. Tonight, notice what mental states are present. If worry arises, recognize it as unwholesome, not because you're bad for experiencing it, but because it creates suffering. You can choose to let it go and cultivate peace instead. If judgment toward yourself arises, recognize it as unwholesome and choose self-compassion. If restlessness is present, recognize it and choose to cultivate calm. This is not suppressing unwholesome states, but wisely recognizing their effects and choosing differently. When you make this choice consistently, wholesome states become more frequent and more stable. Eventually, unwholesome states arise less often and have less power when they do arise. Your mind becomes naturally inclined toward peace, love, and wisdom. This is the fruit of consistent practice, the gradual purification of consciousness that leads to lasting peace. The Buddha taught about what he called the 10 fetters or chains that bind beings to the cycle of suffering. We've mentioned these before, but it's worth exploring how they specifically relate to sleep practice. The first 3 fetters are identity view, doubt, and attachment to rites and rituals. Identity view is believing in a solid, separate, permanent self. This creates the sense of someone who has a sleep problem, someone who needs to achieve something, someone who might fail. Doubt undermines confidence in practice. Attachment to rites and rituals is believing that following the form of practice is what matters rather than the inner transformation it points toward. These first 3 fetters are broken when you gain direct insight into the nature of reality, what's called stream entry in Buddhist terminology. You realize there's no solid self. You gain confidence in the path through direct experience, and you understand that practices are tools pointing toward truth rather than having magical power in themselves. The next 2 fetters are sensual desire and ill will. Sensual desire is the reaching mind that wants pleasant experiences and seeks satisfaction through gratification. Ill will is the pushing away mind that resents unpleasant experiences and wants to eliminate them. These 2 keep consciousness agitated and prevent deep peace. They're weakened at the second stage of awakening and eliminated at the third. For sleep practice, notice when sensual desire is present, perhaps craving for sleep itself, grasping at pleasant sensations, or fantasizing about pleasant experiences. Notice when ill will is present, perhaps aversion to insomnia, resentment about having to deal with sleep difficulties, or pushing away uncomfortable sensations. Both create tension that prevents rest. The alternative is equanimity, meeting pleasant and unpleasant with the same balanced awareness, neither grasping nor resisting. The final 5 fetters are attachment to form realm existence, attachment to formless realm existence, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. These subtle fetters are eliminated only at full enlightenment. They're probably not directly relevant to most people's sleep practice, but they represent the deepest levels of subtle grasping and confusion that prevent complete liberation. Even attachment to very refined meditative states, attachment to a sense of existing, subtle pride in one's attainments, residual agitation, and the fundamental not seeing clearly of reality must ultimately be released. The Buddha's path is thorough, addressing not just obvious suffering, but the most subtle forms of unease that keep consciousness from perfect peace. The Buddha taught that there are 3 kinds of suffering: suffering that is obvious pain, suffering that comes from change, and suffering inherent in conditioned existence itself. The first kind includes physical pain, emotional distress, loss, disappointment. Everyone recognizes this as suffering. The second kind is more subtle. Even pleasant experiences contain suffering because they're impermanent. The pleasure will end, creating a subtle anxiety even during enjoyment. The third kind is most subtle. Even neutral experiences, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, involve a kind of existential unsatisfactoriness because they're empty, impermanent, constantly requiring effort to maintain. Understanding these 3 kinds of suffering helps you see that the Buddha wasn't being pessimistic. He was being thoroughly realistic, pointing out that no conditioned experience, no matter how pleasant, can provide lasting satisfaction. Only the unconditioned, only nirvana, only the peace beyond all grasping and becoming provides final rest. Tonight you might be experiencing all 3 kinds of suffering. Perhaps there's obvious discomfort, physical or emotional. Perhaps there's the suffering of change, remembering pleasant moments from earlier, or anticipating difficulties tomorrow. Perhaps there's the subtle suffering of simply existing, of having to manage yourself through another night, of the ongoing project of being someone. All 3 kinds of suffering are addressed through the same practice: letting go, seeing clearly, resting in unconditioned awareness. When you stop grasping at pleasure, resisting pain, and identifying with experiences, all 3 kinds of suffering ease. You find a peace that doesn't depend on experiences being a certain way. You discover the unconditioned rest that is always available beneath the surface agitation of conditioned existence. The Buddha taught about the relationship between morality, meditation, and wisdom. These 3 trainings are interdependent and mutually supporting. When you live ethically, your mind is naturally more peaceful, creating good conditions for meditation. When you meditate, you develop concentration and clarity, allowing wisdom to arise. When wisdom arises, you see clearly how to live, deepening ethical understanding. Round and round, these 3 support each other, creating an upward spiral of development. You can enter this spiral at any point. If your life is chaotic and unethical, you might start by bringing more integrity to your actions, which will naturally calm your mind. If your mind is scattered and distracted, you might start with meditation to develop concentration. If you're confused about how to live, you might start with study and reflection to develop conceptual understanding. Wherever you start, sincere practice will gradually bring the other elements into balance. Tonight, all 3 trainings are present. Morality is present in how you treat yourself with kindness rather than judgment, in your intention to cultivate peace rather than feed negativity. Meditation is present in your practice of mindfulness and concentration, staying present with breath and these teachings. Wisdom is present in your growing understanding of how mind creates experience, how letting go brings peace, how grasping creates suffering. These 3 are working together right now to transform your consciousness and create the conditions for deep rest. Each night you practice, all 3 become stronger. Your ethical sensitivity deepens as you see more clearly what creates peace and what creates suffering. Your concentration strengthens through repeated practice of returning attention to your chosen object. Your wisdom grows through direct observation of cause and effect in your own mind. This is how transformation happens, not through one dramatic insight, but through gradual, consistent practice that develops all aspects of the path. The Buddha taught that the path is like a raft that carries you across a river from the shore of suffering to the shore of liberation. Once you've crossed the river, you don't need to carry the raft on your back. The teachings and practices are means to an end, not ends in themselves. This is important because it's easy to become attached to practices, to make them into rituals you believe have power in themselves, to feel you're failing if you don't practice perfectly. But practices are just tools. What matters is whether they're helping you cross the river, whether you're moving from suffering toward peace. If a practice is helpful, use it. If it's not helpful, let it go and try something else. The Buddha emphasized flexibility and pragmatism, always checking whether your approach is actually leading to less suffering and more wisdom. Tonight, use these teachings as a raft. Let them carry you from the shore of wakefulness to the shore of sleep, from the shore of agitation to the shore of peace. Don't worry about whether you're using the raft perfectly. Just let it carry you. Tomorrow, you might not even remember most of what you've heard tonight, and that's fine. The teachings are working at a deeper level than conscious memory, conditioning your mind toward peace, creating associations between these practices and deep rest. Over time, your mind will learn that this is the time for letting go, that when you hear these kinds of teachings, your nervous system can relax, that sleep is approaching and it's safe to surrender. The raft is carrying you even when you don't realize it, even when your conscious mind is doubting or distracted. Trust the process and let yourself be carried. As we near the completion of this journey through the Buddha's teachings, as sleep draws closer and your body settles more deeply into rest, let us reflect on the profound gift of this practice. For 2 hours, you've been immersed in wisdom that has transformed millions of lives across 2,000 years. You've heard stories of the Buddha's enlightenment, his compassion, his skillful teaching. You've learned about the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the practices that lead from suffering to liberation. Most importantly, you've been practicing directly, letting go, staying present, meeting difficulty with compassion, cultivating peace. This is not just preparation for sleep. This is preparation for awakening itself. The Buddha taught that every moment is an opportunity to choose wisely, to respond skillfully, to move toward liberation rather than toward further entanglement in suffering. Tonight, you've made countless wise choices. Each time you returned attention to breath or to these teachings, you chose presence over distraction. Each time you let go of a worry or judgment, you chose peace over struggle. Each time you met yourself with compassion rather than criticism, you chose love over fear. These choices accumulate, creating momentum toward awakening. You're not just sleeping tonight, you're walking the path the Buddha discovered, moving step by step toward the complete freedom he realized. The Buddha's final words to his disciples were, "All conditioned things are subject to decay. Work out your own liberation with diligence." This teaching emphasizes both the impermanence of all things and the responsibility each person has for their own awakening. No one can practice for you. No one can see clearly for you. No one can let go for you. You must do this work yourself, but you're not alone. You're supported by the Buddha's teachings, by the example of countless practitioners who have walked this path successfully, by the truth that liberation is possible and that the path leading to it is clear. Tonight, you've been working out your own liberation with diligence, practicing with sincerity and commitment, trusting in the process even when results weren't immediately apparent. As sleep approaches, let yourself feel a sense of completion and satisfaction. You've practiced well. You've given yourself this gift of time and attention dedicated to peace. Whatever happens now, whether sleep comes quickly or takes time, whether it's deep or light, you've done your part. You've created the best possible conditions for rest. You've planted seeds of peace that will continue to grow and flower. You've conditioned your mind toward awakening. This is enough. You are enough. Right now, exactly as you are, you're perfectly lovable, perfectly acceptable, perfectly worthy of the deepest peace and the most restorative rest. The Buddha taught that peace is your natural state, temporarily obscured by clouds of confusion and grasping, but never actually lost. Tonight, you've been clearing away those clouds, letting go of what obscures your natural peace, allowing your innate wisdom and compassion to shine forth. This peace has always been within you, waiting to be recognized, waiting for you to stop looking elsewhere and discover what was here all along. You are the peace you've been seeking. You are the awareness in which all experience arises. You are the vast, loving space that holds all things with infinite tenderness. This is not poetry or philosophy, but the deepest truth about your nature. As we complete this practice, as your consciousness prepares to release into sleep, take a moment to feel profound gratitude. Gratitude for the Buddha who discovered this path and shared it freely. Gratitude for all the teachers and practitioners who preserved these teachings across centuries. Gratitude for your own sincerity and commitment to practice. Gratitude for this body that has carried you through the day and now deserves rest. Gratitude for this breath that has sustained you every moment of your life. Gratitude for this moment itself, this precious opportunity to be alive, to practice, to awaken. Let gratitude fill your heart, overflowing like a fountain, touching everything with appreciation and love. Feel how your body has settled throughout this practice. Notice how much more relaxed you are now than when we began. Your breathing has slowed and deepened. Your muscles have softened. Your mind has quieted. These changes happened naturally as you practiced, as you let go, as you allowed rather than forced. This is how peace works. You don't create it through effort. You allow it by removing obstacles, by letting go of what prevents it. Your body knows how to sleep. Your mind knows how to rest. You don't have to make anything happen. You simply allow the natural process to unfold in its own perfect timing. The Buddha taught about the different stages of sleep consciousness. In deep sleep, consciousness withdraws from the external senses and rests in a peaceful, aware void. In dream sleep, consciousness creates entire worlds, demonstrating the mind's creative power. In the brief moments between sleep and waking, consciousness has the opportunity for profound insight, touching dimensions of awareness not usually accessible during ordinary waking life. All of these states of sleep consciousness are natural, healthy, and restorative. You don't need to control which state you're in or worry about whether you're sleeping correctly. Your consciousness knows how to navigate these states. Trust in this natural wisdom. As the Buddha taught his disciples, he emphasized the importance of ending each day with a clear conscience, with no regrets about harmful actions, with the satisfaction of having lived according to your values. Take a moment now to reflect on today. Were there moments of kindness? Times when you acted with integrity, instances when you were present rather than distracted? Acknowledge these wholesome moments with appreciation. Were there also moments when you acted unskillfully, when you were unkind or dishonest or harmful? Acknowledge these too, but with compassion rather than judgment. You're learning, you're growing, you're doing the best you can with the understanding you currently have. Forgive yourself for mistakes. Set the intention to learn from them and do better tomorrow. Then let them go completely, releasing both the wholesome and unwholesome into the past where they belong. The Buddha taught that each morning we're reborn, each night we die. This might sound dramatic, but it points to the truth that consciousness is constantly arising and passing away, constantly creating and dissolving, constantly being born and dying. When you sleep, your waking self dies. When you wake, a new self is born. This process of dying and rebirth happens not just daily, but moment by moment throughout your entire life. Nothing about you remains the same from one moment to the next. You are a constant flow, a river that appears continuous but is actually made of ever-changing water. Understanding this deeply liberates you from clinging to any fixed identity, from believing you are a solid, permanent self that needs defending and maintaining. Tonight, practice dying consciously. Let go of who you were today. Release your identity, your concerns, your stories about yourself. Die to the small self and rest as vast awareness. Tomorrow you can be born again fresh, without having to carry the accumulation of past selves. In the Buddhist tradition, there's a practice of dedicating the merit of your practice for the benefit of all beings. Merit is the positive energy, the good karma, created by wholesome actions and intentions. When you dedicate this merit, you're consciously offering the fruits of your practice for the welfare of all, rather than hoarding them for yourself alone. This practice of dedication accomplishes two things. First, it extends your compassion beyond yourself to include all beings, which naturally opens and softens the heart. Second, it protects against spiritual pride, the subtle tendency to feel superior because of your practice. Let's practice dedication now. May whatever peace I've discovered tonight be shared with all beings. May the merit of this practice contribute to the awakening of all consciousness everywhere. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings know peace. May all beings awaken to their true nature. Feel how this dedication expands your heart, connects you to all life, transforms your practice from personal to universal. The Buddha taught that there are three kinds of wisdom: wisdom gained through learning, wisdom gained through reflection, and wisdom gained through meditation or direct experience. Tonight, you've engaged all three. You've learned through hearing these teachings. You've reflected as you've contemplated their meaning and application. You've directly experienced the truth of the teachings through your practice of letting go, staying present, meeting difficulty with compassion. This direct experiential wisdom is what transforms. You now know, not just intellectually, but through your own experience, that letting go brings relief, that presence is peaceful, that compassion heals. This knowing will support you not just tonight, but in all future nights, not just with sleep, but with all of life's challenges. As consciousness continues to soften and blur, as the boundary between waking and sleeping becomes less distinct, you might notice a beautiful in-between state. You're no longer fully awake, but not yet fully asleep. Thoughts arise, but don't have their usual grip. Awareness is present, but diffuse, spacious. This liminal state is precious. It's a glimpse of consciousness without the usual overlay of self-construction, without the constant mental chatter, without the endless doing and becoming. Simply rest in this twilight awareness. Don't try to prolong it or grasp at it. Simply notice it, appreciate it, allow it to deepen naturally into sleep. The Buddha compared the mind to a mirror. When the mirror is clean and polished, it reflects everything clearly, exactly as it is. When the mirror is covered with dust and grime, reflections are distorted. The practice is polishing the mirror, clearing away the obscurations of greed, hatred, and delusion so consciousness can reflect reality clearly. Tonight, you've been polishing your mirror through practice, letting go, staying present, developing concentration and wisdom. The mirror of your consciousness is clearer now than when we began. Tomorrow, continue this polishing. Each moment of mindfulness, each choice for wisdom over confusion, each act of compassion polishes the mirror a little more. Gradually, over days and weeks and months and years, the mirror becomes so clear that it perfectly reflects the truth of things, and this clear seeing is liberation itself. There's a story about a Zen master who was asked what happens after enlightenment. He said, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. This teaching points to the ordinariness of awakening. Life continues with its basic activities and responsibilities. What changes is not what you do, but how you do it. Not the external circumstances, but your relationship to them. After awakening, you still sleep and wake, eat and work, feel pleasant and unpleasant sensations, but you're no longer lost in identification with these experiences. You're no longer creating suffering through grasping and resistance. You meet everything with wisdom and compassion, and this transforms the most ordinary activities into expressions of freedom. Tonight, as you chop wood and carry water, as you simply lie here breathing and allowing sleep to come, you're practicing this awakened relationship to ordinary experience. You're not waiting for something extraordinary to happen. You're fully present to this ordinary moment of preparing for ordinary sleep. And in this full presence, in this complete acceptance, you discover that the ordinary is actually extraordinary, that this simple moment contains everything, that peace is not somewhere else in special circumstances, but right here in the midst of whatever is happening. The Buddha taught that the highest happiness is not found in pleasure or achievement or even in subtle meditative states. The highest happiness is nirvana, the complete liberation from suffering, the perfect peace that depends on no conditions. This might sound distant and abstract, but actually you taste nirvana every time you let go completely. Every moment you're not grasping or resisting, every instant of pure presence without self-construction. Nirvana is not somewhere else. It's the nature of things when seen clearly, experienced without the overlay of craving and aversion and delusion. Tonight, in your deepest letting go, in the space between thoughts, in the perfect peace of presence, you're tasting nirvana. It's always been here, waiting for you to stop looking elsewhere and recognize what's already present. As sleep finally claims you, as consciousness releases its grip and dissolves into rest, know that you're held by something much larger than your small self. You're held by the Dharma, the truth of how things are. You're held by the Buddha's compassion, his wish for all beings to find liberation. You're held by your own Buddha nature, the awakened consciousness that has always been your deepest identity. You're held by the universe itself, the vast intelligence that creates and sustains all life. You are not separate from this holding. You are this holding. You are the love that holds all things, the peace that surpasses understanding, the awareness in which everything arises and dissolves. Let go now completely. Release all effort, all intention, all sense of needing to manage this experience. Trust that sleep will come in its own time, in its own way. Trust that your body knows how to rest. Trust that your mind knows how to restore itself. Trust that your consciousness knows how to navigate the realms of sleep and return you safely to waking. There's nothing more you need to do, nothing to achieve, nothing to become. Simply rest in the peace that you are, the love that you are, the vast awareness that you have always been. The Buddha's final gift to his disciples was the teaching that each person must walk the path for themselves, that liberation is not granted by an external authority, but discovered through one's own practice and direct seeing. Tonight, you've walked your path with courage and sincerity. You've practiced with diligence. You've trusted in teachings that have proven their worth across millennia. And now you rest in the fruits of your practice, the peace that arises naturally when you stop creating suffering through resistance and grasping. May you sleep in deep peace. May your body heal and restore itself completely. May your mind clear and refresh itself. May your heart open to even greater compassion. May your consciousness touch dimensions of wisdom and peace beyond ordinary waking awareness. May you wake tomorrow renewed, refreshed, and ready to meet the day with presence and grace. May your practice tonight support your liberation. May all beings everywhere find peace. May all beings be free from suffering. May all consciousness awaken to its true nature. Rest now in the infinite love that holds all things. Rest in the perfect peace of your own true nature. Rest in the Buddha's blessing, the Dharma's protection, the Sangha's support. You are home. You have always been home. Sleep in this recognition. Sleep in this peace. Sleep in this love. The Buddha taught, and now you rest in his teaching. The path is clear. The way is open. The destination is here. Simply close your eyes and let the ocean of peace carry you into the deepest, most healing sleep. Let go of everything and rest in the boundless awareness that you truly are. Sweet dreams, dear one. May your sleep be blessed. May peace be your companion through all the watches of the night. May you awaken refreshed and renewed, ready to walk the path of liberation with joy and dedication. Until tomorrow, rest in perfect peace.